My name is Councillor Garrick Stevens, and I'm the chair of the committee. Our vice chair is Councillor Fiona Guest, who's sitting at the front here. The other members of the committee in attendance at the meeting are councillors. Let's go through this. Alan, Bromham, Jankowski at the back there. We've got Councillor Anderson substituting on the front, Councillor Riddick, Councillor Walker, and obviously Councillor Guest. We have a number of apologies. We'll come to that in a minute. And there are a number of councillor officers in attendance, and these are: the lead officer is Philip Stanley, who's the head of development management. We've got Brian E. Curtin, who'll be presenting on 5A, Robert Freeman presenting on 5B, and Heather Eady, who'll be presenting on 5C and D. In attendance, we also have Adele Stapleton here, who is our solicitor, who is here to make sure that we adhere to the procedures. And Kaylee Johnson here is member support and will be making a record of the minutes, etc. So that we've got a record for the future. We're not expecting a fire drill this evening, but if the alarm sounds, please make your way to the ground floor and assemble outside. If the meeting is extended, there may be a comfort break during the meeting at around 9 p.m. And before we start, please mute or turn off your mobile phones. We've got some standing items on the agenda before we get to the actual applications. The first item is the minutes. It's to approve the minutes of the last meeting of the committee, which was held on the 13th of November. The minutes have been circulated. Are these minutes agreed? Thank you. I'll sign them after the meeting. Apologies for absence. We've got an apology from Councillor Anderson, who's unwell, Councillors Hobson, Madden and Mitchell, who are away, and Councillor Wyatt Lowe, who is away, but she's being substituted by Councillor Anderson. Thank you. Declarations of interest. The next item on the agenda is declaration of interest. Please can I remind members to declare any disclosable pecuniary or other interests at the beginning of the relevant planning application. Any member who declares an interest will be allowed to stay in the meeting, but will not have the right to vote. I also want to remind members that only those present during the entire debate for an item are entitled to vote on it. Item 4 on the agenda is public participation. I'd like to remind members and the public about the rules regarding public participation. We have a number of members of the public who have registered to speak, and the list has been circulated. Our normal practice is to bring forward applications where a speaker is present, but we do have speakers for all the items this evening. You will be invited to address the meeting when the item you have registered to speak for is to be discussed. The normal procedure and rules in respect of times to speak will apply, and the time per speaker is 3 minutes. And where more than one person is speaking on a planning application, the shared time is increased from 3 to 5 minutes. The 5 minutes will normally be shared equally unless the sharing of time has otherwise been arranged prior to the meeting. Ward councillors will be entitled to their own 5 minutes to speak, and speakers in objection to the officer's recommendation are taken first. The timer will be displayed on the screen and times will be strictly enforced. Members of the public will not be entitled to take part in the discussion that follows the public speakers. I have the discretion to remove any member of the public from the meeting if they interrupt, try to engage in the discussion, or are abusive. For each application, the officer will present the report to the committee. Then the participants from the public are called to speak, and following this, questions are taken from the committee, along with statements and comments for debate. There will be a vote among councillors, which will represent the decision of the committee. Now, the first item on the agenda, Councillor Reddy.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to declare an interest in item 5C, inasmuch that this particular property actually lies within my ward. I've had no communications with the applicant at all, so I do come with an open mind.
Might like to remind us when we come to it.
I'll do the same.
Right, Councillor Walker, right. Taking item 5A, because the item 5A is in Berkhamsted, and I'm a Berkhamsted town councillor and borough councillor, and I have been chair of the planning committee at the town council and was responsible for many of the comments that have come forward on this application. Had there been only one access on Chesham Road, it was a moot point whether I would carry on as chair in the meeting. But in fact, with a third access coming on Fieldway, which is where I live, it's probably best that I stand down for this particular item. So Councillor Guest is standing in for me on this item. Let me move this. And the speakers list here. Let me
Good evening, committee. My name's Councillor Fiona Guest. I'm vice chairman of the committee. I'll be chairing this item, which is land at Chesham Road, Berkhamsted. The case officer is Bryony Curtin. So when you're ready, Bryony.
Thank you. Before I start the presentation, I have got two updates for members. Firstly, it's an apology. I've set out the wrong paragraph numbers for the MPPF in the prematurity section of my report. So I should have referred to paragraph 50 in my paragraph 12.473, and in the following paragraph, it should have referred to the MPPF paragraph 51. The quotes that I've given are correct. It's simply the paragraph numbers that should read 50 and 51. The second update is in relation to a plan referenced in the addendum. If I can get you to go to the next slide, please, Heather. This plan is not a new plan. This is a zoomed in version of a plan that has already been submitted, and it's zoomed in response to clearly annotate the visibility displays that were being questioned. So it's just for members' clarity. It's not a new plan that's referred to in that addendum. It's a zoomed in version of an existing plan. Okay, so this is an outline planning application for a residential-led development. It is an EIA development, so it is accompanied by an environmental statement, and that assesses the likely environmental impacts of the proposal and identifies any necessary mitigation. So next slide, please, Heather. So the application site can be seen here, etched in red, and the land, which is also in the control of the applicants, is edged blue. This is an aerial image of the site to put it into context for members. So you can see the A41 running to the south of the site, so south of the red application site. You've got Ashland School to the centre of the image, with Thomas Coram School slightly to the east. You've got Swingate Lane running through the centre of the two parcels and to the centre of the slide, and that leads to the High Street and London Road to the north. So again, to add some more context for members, you've got the Chilterns National Landscape, which is hatched green just to the northeast, and that's just above the Grand Union Canal that you can see in yellow there. And then you can see a series of footpaths and rights of ways in the blue, green and purple. So hopefully that gives some more context. Looking at connectivity and the site context, you can see the railway line to the north in blue, the main arterial routes in orange, and then the footpaths and bridleways on the previous slide are on purple on this slide. So again, site context in terms of the topography, as set out in the report, the land rises with the highest part in the centre of the eastern parcel, and there's a ridgeline there that runs east to west along the centre of that field. So looking at drainage and flooding, the top image shows the flood zones. So you can see that the site is entirely in flood zone 1, and that is the lowest risk of flooding. The bottom image is flood risk in relation to surface water. And this flood risk highlights, you can just see the blue area on to London Road there, and that's the area that residents refer to in their comments. And the drainage strategy has taken that into account. So that's surface water flood risk at the bottom, and then flood zone 1 at the top. Very quick look at the existing trees and the ecological features. The plan shows the existing vegetation around most of the boundaries of the site, and the stars that I've put there highlight the protected trees. The council has recently served a series of TPOs. You can see one on the application site in the centre of the eastern field, and the other 2 stars are actually tree preservation ordnance that are just outside the application site. Just a point for members to note here that the majority of these trees and landscape features are being retained, but I've got a slide later on to show that as well. Oh, sorry. So in terms of the landscape context and the heritage, again, you can see the Chilterns National Landscape just to the northeast, which is hatched green. You can see the listed buildings in proximity to the application site. So you've got Ashlands School, which is a grade 2 listed building, Ashlands Hall, which is a grade 2 star, and next to that, Ashlands Hall Stables, which is grade 2. You can also see the relationship of the application site to the conservation area, which is highlighted brown. And this is just a quick slide showing members the evolution of the town of Berkhamsted that's expanded from its historic core up the base of the valley and up the slopes. So again, just a quick slide that my report refers to the landscape character areas, which I'm sure you've read. This just puts that in context. The application site is within landscape LCA 110, and that's the Ashlands and Wigginton Plateau. Okay, so this slide shows the applicant's response to the landscape and visual considerations and the key points that have informed the proposals. So you can see the points there from 1 to 5. So the existing retained and enhanced woodlands at number 1. So that's at the south. You can see the creation of the wooded public open space at number 2 on the far east. You've got 3, the retention of the green character along Gate Lane, which is number 3 down the centre of the image. 4 is the retained and supplemented vegetation at the northern boundary, so adjacent to the Upper Hall Park properties. And then 5 is the retention of the views across to the Chilterns landscape, to Ashlands Hall towards the listed building. So again, in terms of the applicants have assessed what they consider are the key potential active travel opportunities, and these have been informed, these have informed the proposals. So you've got identified the key active travel and movement corridors that, as the applicants see it, are highlighted in green. So moving on to the proposals themselves, as I've already set out, this is an outline planning application, and it seeks that a residential-led development that would be accessed from 3 points. So Chesham Road, Gate Lane and Fieldway. You can see those with the yellow, with the white arrows and annotations. You'll note each development parcel is separate and has its own access point, and they're colour-coded up there. It's important for members to note that the access from Chesham Road is the one that's for detailed approval, so full details are contained in the submission. Gate Lane and Fieldway, the detail of those roads is reserved, but it's important that members note the access points themselves are fixed. So the detail is to follow, but those 3 access points are fixed and secured on the parameter plans. So again, as set out, the detailed access from Chesham Road is for approval, and the report highlights the 5 plan numbers that this relates to, but this is an overview slide to show all of those 5 detailed plans put together. So you can see the carriageway in grey throughout the centre. That goes from Chesham Road on the left, right through to the western parcel on the right. A footpath is provided along Ashlands Grove, switches sides of the carriageway, but there is a footway across its entirety. And then you'll see there's a cycle and pedestrian route, which initially adjoins the carriageway, but then it actually goes off-site via existing land in Ashland School, and that's what you can see yellow and green and annotated on the slide above. So again, this is the indicative Swingate Lane access. So the point in yellow is fixed, but everything south of that line is a reserved detail for a later point. So above, they're indicative, and they show a bus route via the local centre. They show the closure of Swingate Lane to vehicles towards the south of this image, but pedestrian and cycle access would remain. So again, the indicative fieldway access, so the point in yellow is fixed, but the remainder of the detail would be a reserved matter for a later date. So moving on to the proposed parameter plans, there are 5 parameter plans which are set out on the next 5 slides. They are also for approval. Now these set out the maximum and minimum parameters within which the future reserved matters applications would need to be developed. So the plans secure certain fixes and set out the maximum and minimum parameters that the development must meet. So this first one is the land use parameter plan. So you can see the different uses are colour-coded and they're fixed to particular locations on the site. So you can see the various different land use zones up there. And then we've got the building heights parameter plan. So this sets out the range of building heights that the future reserved matters would be informed by. The plan has been informed by the topography and the landscape visual impact assessment work. And as a result of that, the highest development is restricted on the most sensitive parts of the site. So towards the edges where the countryside is and towards the listed building on the left. And then the heights around the local centre with the apartments on top of retail uses which are being suggested is where the higher densities are concentrated. So then we've got the access and the movement parameter plan. So this secures the location of the access points I was referring to before. So the Chesham Road, Swingate Lane and the Fieldway. So the points of access are secured, but the detail is to come at a later date. The orange through the middle of the site shows the main vehicular route that goes from the left to the right. Members should note that there is no vehicular access between the different shaded parcels above, so vehicles cannot go between all of the parcels. The green is the pedestrian and the cycle route, and you'll see that all parcels are linked by that route. So pedestrians and cyclists can go all the way through all the different development parcels, but vehicles are restricted to the access points colour-coded up there. So then the next parameter plan is the density plan. So this has been set to ensure a balance is met between protecting the assets in terms of the countryside, the national landscape and the listed buildings, but also ensuring that the site is used effectively and efficiently and that the optimum number of dwellings are achieved. So this is a balance between those factors and it secures a range of densities. You can see the highest densities again are around the local centre and the lowest densities are on the sensitive edges around this edge of the sites. Okay, so for the green infrastructure plan, there's quite a big key. So I've done a separate slide for you here, but the detailed, so the elements that members should really note are the green open spaces and the play areas, and the key landscape corridors throughout the site, which are defined at a minimum width. And the reason for that is to ensure that adequate planting can be secured within them. So on the next slide is the parameter plan itself. So again, you can note those green open spaces and the green corridors that link those with the minimum widths now secured on that parameter plan. Okay, so this is the submitted illustrative master plan. Now this sets out one way that the development could be delivered in line with those approved parameter plans. And this is what's been modelled in the environmental statement and the landscape visual impact assessment. So this is what's informed those. And next we've got the illustrative phasing plan. So I think the text is a bit small up there, but you've got various different phases. So you've got phase 1, which would be the sports paddock on the left, the residential parcel to the south, and then the primary school. Then you've got phase 2, which would be the local centre with the residential surrounding that. Phase 3 at the bottom there, and then phase 4 would be the last phase off of Fieldway. So then we've got the indicative dwelling mix. So this is, like I say, indicative. This would be for detailed consideration at reserve matter stage. And we've also got the non-residential floor spaces in the box on the right. So members should note that indicatively, it would be 403 market houses, 269 of which would be affordable units. There's a 70 extra care units, of which 28 would be affordable. And as you can see up there, it is a varied mix that covers a range of house styles, sizes and types. And the local centre, on the right, you've got the non-residential uses. So within the local centre, there would be a retail use up to 500 square metres, a community building up to 500 square metres, a nursery up to 500 square metres with an extra 200 square metres of external space, and then a healthcare building up to 900 square metres. And you'll have noticed there is a condition that secures those as maximum floor spaces for the non-residential uses. So just a quick slide based on the illustrative master plan. This is the indicative housing mix across the entire site. This slide is a slide of the off-site and on-site highway mitigation. I appreciate it's small, but all of those measures are set out in the report. And I just wanted to highlight the context whereby you can see the application site in relation to those highway measures being proposed. That is a package of measures, like I say, on-site and off-site. Then just a quick few slides giving you a quick closer view of the illustrative master plan. So this is the western field. You can see number 4 on the left is a historic parkland that's looking to be reintroduced, and that's to give some space to that listed building that you can see on the left. So that's Ashlands Hall, which is grade 2 star. And you can see at number 2, there is the pedestrian and the cycle route that runs across the entire north of the western field. Again, this is indicative, so it's one way the development could come forward. Moving to the eastern field, again, some of the points I just want to highlight. So you've got number 16, which is the open space to the right. The idea of this is a soft edge between the countryside and the development. And that's also the area closest to the longer distance views from the Chilterns National Landscape. And then you should be able to hopefully just make out number 14, 15 and 12. That's the central green corridor, and that leads to the local centre where there would also be a neighbourhood area of play at number 12 in the centre there. And finally, an indicative layout of the paddock land. So this is the parcel of land immediately adjacent to Chesham Road. So indicatively, this is the layout for the 3G football pitch that is being provided, 4 paddle courts, a multi-use games area, and a sports pavilion that would manage all of those areas with some changing facilities. So that's the indicative layout for the paddock, the sports facilities. Then just a slide that illustrates an overview of the sports and play provision. So the paddock land that I just referred to is on the left of the slide with the blue square. Then hopefully you can see the various annotations across there and the asterisks and things that are the play areas, from local areas of play through to neighbourhood equipped areas of play. Quick plan, just as I already referred to, and these are the trees and the landscape features that were in the site context plans. And what you can see here is the majority of those all around the edge of the sites are being retained. Blue infrastructure plan, so you can see there's 4 storage attenuation basins across the entire site, and you can see the potential linear swales and rain gardens that would run along those routes that you can see in blue there. And again, just a quick slide to show members the location of the application site, so outlined in red there, in relation to the brown, which is the Haresfoot Farm Sang. This is one of the Sang solutions being proposed by the applicants. The other one is Castle Hill, but this is just to highlight to members the proximity of that Sang to the application site, and there's a direct pedestrian route between the two. Okay, so moving on to the location of the acoustic barrier. Now, an acoustic barrier is required in order to make the development acceptable for residential purposes because of the noise from the A41. So this is the location of the acoustic barrier. So you can see it runs across the entire southern area of the site. It's not that thick, that's just indicative on the plans. But what there is, if planning permission is granted, we would have full details of that acoustic barrier, and a 10-metre landscape buffer is secured to the side of that buffer, to the side of the barrier, sorry. And again, just an idea of what that might look like. You can see the barrier in the middle on the top of the brown earth. You can see the 10-metre landscape buffer to the right of that barrier, and then the relationship of that barrier, the landscape buffer, and then the indicative illustrative master plan. And again, just a longer distance view of the section on the bottom. So you can see the existing woodland and the existing landscaping, the bund, and then the 10-metre buffer that would be to the right of that before the proposed development starts. A very quick slide just to show members where the air quality monitoring was undertaken, and then these were used to inform the proposals and the strategies put forwards. Okay, so to put it in context for you again, just going to look at some visuals for you. These are images from the landscape visual impact assessments. So at the top there, you can see the image. Hopefully you can just about make this, the number 6 in the circle with the arrow is just on the divide of the thick. So that's a view from across the field to the east on one of the footpaths. So the top view is an existing view from that footpath. The middle view is with the development in situ after year 1. And the bottom view is the landscaping in that open space. So that's at year 15. So you can see the top is existing, middle is year 1, and the bottom is the planting, which is established at year 15. So the next image is from viewpoint 10. So that's within the national landscape. So again, you can see the existing view at the top. So you see the characteristic tree line with the settlement of Berkhamsted going into the valley. Middle image, you see year 1. So it's a bit blurry, I'm afraid, but you do just see some of the roofs just below the skyline in that image. And then the bottom image is year 15, whereby the development you can see is then interspersed with trees, and that characteristic treed landscape at the top on the horizon remains. And the last image for you from the landscape visual impact assessment is from Ivy House Lane. So that's on the edge of the Chilterns National Landscape, and that's viewpoint 22. So the top image is existing. So again, you can see those characteristic trees. Then in the middle, you can see the roofs of the development there, just along the top. And then in the bottom, with the landscape planting mitigation at year 15. Okay, so looking at some of the photographs of the application site in more detail. So you can see at the top there, you've got the existing Chesham Road access. So that's Chesham Road looking into the development site. And then the bottom 2 images are looking both ways along Chesham Road. So the bottom left is back towards Ashland School, and the bottom right is back towards the roundabout off of the A41. This is as I move into the application site, so along Ashlands Grove. So again, you can see the school fencing on the right of the top image, with the paddock land to the left of that image. And then the bottom image there, you can see the paddock land with the landscaping, and then the fencing of Ashlands School you can hopefully just make out. This is where the road would be widened to provide the access into the development with the footpaths to the side. So this is views of the paddock. So that's the first parcel closest to Chesham Road. So the top left is from Chesham Road with the access there, and then the field of the paddock would be in the background. Top right is halfway along Chesham Road, so further towards the A41, and that's where there's a pedestrian access into the existing field. So that's the field that you can see beyond the hedgerow and the pedestrian access. Bottom left is an image from the access road to Ashland's care home at the bottom. So you're looking from the south up across the paddock to the north. And then the bottom right is from the corner of the paddock looking back towards the A41 at the bottom where the dark trees are, and then Chesham Road would be on my right. Moving further along Ashlands Grove, so you've got the, again, you can see the characteristic features of the Ashlands fence line on the top left image. In the middle, I'm moving along the Ashlands Grove access road. So you start to see the properties here. So you can see the relationship of the access road with those existing properties. And again, moving further, these are the properties closest to the proposed access road, which again, my report sets out the impact of this road on those properties. So this is just to put this into context for members. So on the top right, you can see where those gates are. That would be the access through into the Western Field and the remainder of the proposed development. So those slides hopefully show members the relationship of the road to those existing properties. Okay, so moving to Swingate Lane, what I'm doing here is I'm starting halfway down and then I'm going to move down Swingate Lane. So the top left is Chestnut Grove where it meets Swingate Lane, and the application site would be in the background. Then I start to move into Swingate Lane. So the application site's on the left in that middle slide, so beyond the tree line. And then the bottom left is the reverse. So I'm stood further up Swingate Lane, looking back down to the reverse of the image on the top left. Again, just an image of Swingate Lane in the middle, moving up towards the top of Swingate Lane. So these slides are just some close-ups of the existing Thomas Coram School entrance. So you can see Swingate Lane obviously on the left, and then the school has an in and out drop-off zone with some parking spaces within it. So you can see that in and out, and it's just important for members to note that that doesn't change as a result of the proposals. That in and out access for the school remains exactly as it is now. Once you get past the school, this is me walking further down Swingate Lane. So you can see in the first image there on the top left, that's me come past the school, and then you can see the fields, the application fields coming into sight on the left and the right. So this is me walking down Swingate Lane. So you can see from that view, you can see the open fields that are the application site. Again, from the bottom, well, not the bottom of Swingate Lane, but the middle point of Swingate Lane, just before it goes over the bypass, that first image is with the two fields. The application sites will be on the left and right there. The big image there, you've got the application field. So the western field would be on the left and the eastern parcel would be on the right. Just another view for you in the bottom there. So this is a view from Swingate Lane, looking over the western field, and the white building you can see there is Ashlands Hall, which is the Grade 2 star listed building. So these are the existing long distance views that you get across the field to that listed building. You can just about hopefully make the building out on the left of the shot on the right, but that was just also to show the tree lines and the hedge lines that would be maintained, and that's where the cycle and pedestrian route would run along the north of that western field, sorry. And then this is just a view going back down Swingate Lane. So this is from back on the corner to show the relationship of the field to the properties of Swingate Lane. And then the bottom two images are just of Swingate Lane. So again, going back down Swingate Lane, and then the bottom right just gives you an idea of the character of Swingate Lane. And then finally, Fieldway, which is the third access point. So the top left image is along Upper Hall Park with the Fieldway in the distance there. Middle at the top is me getting to the corner of the Fieldway access. Top right, I'm still on that junction looking up, and the application site would be in the distance between the properties. And then the bottom three are just as I move up that existing road of Fieldway, and the application site is behind those trees and shrubbery. And then this is on the application field itself. So there's a right of way that runs down the side. So that's just to put it in context for you. So the properties of Fieldway you can see in those images, and the relationship of the application site and those existing footpaths with those properties and the application site. So again, just to remind members, the planning application is in outline form with detailed Chesham Road access for approval. All other matters are reserved. So this is just a reminder, the overview of the access road, and this is for approval. And then again, just to remind members, an overview of the proposals. So the three access points which would be fixed, so that's Chesham Road, Swingate Lane and Fieldway. And then I'm just going to leave members with this slide and remind them that the application must be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Now, for the reasons set out in the report, the proposals are not considered to accord with the development plan when taken as a whole. However, officers conclude that there are material considerations that weigh in favour of the proposals. There are no strong reasons to refuse the application in relation to footnote 7, so that's the greenbelt landscape, and the lack of a 5-year housing supply means the tilted balance is engaged. So as it says at the top of there, in accordance with paragraph 11D(ii), planning permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Now, some harms have been identified, but in officers' opinion, they do not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So just to remind members, it's recommended that the application, is delegated with a view to approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report and the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement and an appropriate assessment. Thank you. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Bryony. Now we come to speakers, and there are quite a few speakers on this item. How we take it is speakers against the officer recommendation first, and then speakers in favour of the officer recommendation. And within the against and fors, we take members of the public first, then community groups, then town or parish councils, then the ward councillor. So I'll call the members of the public speaking first. And I've been given a preferred order here. So that's first it'll be Elizabeth O'Reilly, then Helena Morris, then Thomas Ritchie. So you'll have 5 minutes between you, but unless you've pre-arranged it, don't have one person speaking for 4 minutes, 50 seconds, and the others only having 10 seconds between you to give each other a fair crack of the whip. So it'll be Elizabeth O'Reilly first, then Helena Morris, then Thomas Ritchie, and you'll have 5 minutes between you. So, Ms. O'Reilly, when you're ready. You press the silver button on the base unit.
Councillors, I would suggest that if you can't satisfy yourselves of the answers to the following questions, then this application must be deemed premature. 1. Is it appropriate to deal with access from Chesham Road in isolation when in fact access to and from the site is now proposed from 3 routes? They are all interrelated and must be considered together. The photos shown don't reveal the steep nature of Gate Lane or traffic at peak hours. 2, are you content that under paragraphs 115 and 116 of the MPPF, A, safe and suitable access to and from the site can be achieved during and post-construction, and B, that the residual cumulative impacts on the road network following mitigation will not be severe, taking into account all reasonable future scenarios? The active travel so enthusiastically advocated by the developer to ensure the road network isn't negatively impacted is wholly unrealistic. The impact on roads will be severe. DBC's 2024 Berkhamsted and Tring Sustainable Transport Study noted that the town's hilly terrain poses a significant challenge to sustainable travel behaviour. The town is facing a multitude of planning applications for major developments, and these future scenarios must be taken into account. 3, should a decision be taken by you on this application allowing for removal of the site from Greenbelt prior to the conclusion of the examination of the local plan, which is at an advanced stage, and which will provide a complete picture for the borough as a whole? Do you accept that DBC has exhausted all other reasonable options? The flawed 2013 DBC Greenbelt review has been accepted as fact, notwithstanding the findings of Bragg accepted by Berkhamsted Town Council. 4, should this application be determined before the options for managing the current excess capacity in local schools are aired, and when the application relates to access to a site to include a new school? To make a decision supporting this application tonight lays you open to legal challenge for acting outside of the MPPF, and I urge you to reject it.
Members of the committee, let's be absolutely clear what stands before you. Not simply a residential development, but a fundamental re-engineering of how Berkhamsted functions. The proposal to ban right-hand turns across key routes pushes all vehicles into the residential streets. Not a minor adjustment, but a dramatic intervention that changes how residents travel, access services, and safely uses their community. Your own reports confirm it would displace traffic into streets that cannot take it. And whilst the photos you've seen tonight have been crafted without any traffic in, it's simply not the truth. Crucially, this change isn't introduced because the town needs it, because the development cannot function without imposing it. That is not plan-led decision-making. The MPPF is explicit. Development must provide safe and suitable access for all users, and planning permission must be refused where residential cumulative impacts on the transport network will be severe. Ultimately, the scheme fails the NPPF transport test and does not deliver safe access. It generates cumulative impacts, reshapes the town's network to suit the development rather than the community. And tonight, you are being asked to fix those routes. Members, the choice is clear. Let the development reshape the town, or let the town shape the development. The right choice is to refuse it.
Mr. Ritchie, could you use the microphone, please? You press the bottom of the base unit. Ah, you've got one that works there.
It's working now.
Kaylee, so about 15 seconds have been lost. Would you be able to account for that, please?
It's longer than that.
Longer than that. Councillors, please consider the scale of this application. 742 houses. That means between 2,000 and 2,500 people. Berkhamsted Town Council have already unanimously objected to this application. It's a long-term project. It was first registered with the council in December 2024, and there is absolutely no need for you to make a quick decision on this. After the earlier applications and discussions, a number of consultant processes went through, including no fewer than 1,500 letters of objection, all pointing to the access roads, which are completely inadequate. The item that's come back to you and is in front of you today addresses none of these items. The main one, which is for the majority of the houses.
Time's up.
Am I no more time?
Time's up, Mr. Ritchie. So I'll now call the next speaker, who's Mr. Anthony Harbridge, the chair of the Berkhamsted Residents Action Group, BRAG.
Chair, I looked at the clock when all this bubble started, and I think that the gentleman would be allowed another 20 seconds. I really do. I think we've cut him off too short. I think he should be allowed to speak. Yeah, he should be allowed.
Kaylee.
Thank you.
To work that out, please, and give Mr. Ritchie the time he's entitled to. Mighty ho. We have another 30 seconds, Mr. Ritchie.
The main culprit here is, and it's shown on the plans that you've seen, is the Chesham Road, which is to account for 450 houses. This is a one-way street. It's shown on the map that the officer has put up as a two-way street, but it's a one-way street, and it has to facilitate 1,800 kids, mainly walking to the secondary school in the town. The only way back from that road is to wind
Time.
the houses.
Thank you for your time. I'll now call the next speaker, Mr. Anthony Harbridge, who's the chair of the Berkhamsted Residents Action Group, BRAG. Mr. Harbridge, you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Okay. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for hearing me. I'm speaking on behalf of the Berkhamsted Residents Action Group. Bragg asks you to reject the recommendations before you. This is productive greenbelt land on a sensitive ridge top. It meets all 5 purposes of greenbelt. Suggestions that his greenbelt contribution is weak is merely biased opinion. Good planning must take a holistic view of how development fits into the town, the wider settlement pattern and the borough as a whole. That is exactly what the new local plan, now being examined by 2 inspectors, is intended to do. Agree with the details or not, it provides the strategic framework, and the detail has to be scrutinised without fear of being undermined. With that in mind, it is undeniable that this application is premature. Bragg recognises the pressures and need for housing, but it must be in the right locations. This site is not. This site has been promoted for decades and repeatedly rejected, not on a whim, but because of poor sustainability credentials and, crucially, serious access constraints. Until the amended application, Herts Highways consistently maintained that Gate Lane and Fieldway were not suitable for general traffic and that the Chesham Road access in its original application form was unsafe. So what has changed? Nothing has changed physically. What has changed is the way the consultants have manipulated trip generation figures to make access appear acceptable. I know you will have read all of Bragg's submissions for this application and the detailed explanation contained in Bragg's email to members. But it bears repeating that the consultant's own traffic monitoring show that the houses adjacent to the site currently generate 6.3 vehicle movements per day per dwelling. That's more than twice the 2.9 claimed for the development. This is critical because it doesn't matter what subsequent modelling is done, be it for the dubious mitigations at the A41 Chesham Road Gateway or the absurd town centre junction suggestions, which will drive traffic into the surrounding narrow residential roads and put at risk our own street markets that dates back 1,000 years to Saxon times. Right? With models, rubbish in means rubbish out. Members, please apply your real-world judgment. No one in this room honestly believes this ridge-top car-dependent development will generate only 2.9 daily vehicle movements per dwelling. Because access is the matter before you, Bragg urges you to recognise that the evidence is incomplete, inconsistent and unsupported. Thank you for your time. It is genuinely appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Harbidge, and thank you for keeping so well to time. I'll now call the next speaker, who's Councillor Garrick Stevens, who's going to be speaking in his capacity as a Berkhamsted Town Councillor. Councillor Stevens, speaking as a Town Councillor, you'll have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I'm here to represent the views of our residents and the Town Council. As the Chair of the Planning Committee, I have led our working parties on the responses to the various regulations, in particular Reg 20 consultation last autumn, with a focus on the South Berkhamsted site. That work anticipated many of the comments of the fundamentally flawed application that BTC objected to at our January Planning Committee meeting. With over 1,400 comments, the officer's very comprehensive report summarises the themes in Appendix 1. I will pick out the principal objections, largely based on the BTC comments. These range from, quote, no development in the green belt at any price, and it is premature to consider the application until after the examination of the local plan. They went on, so many houses at the top of the hill will worsen the traffic issues in the town centre. There are no safe routes for active travel, walking and cycling from the site, with only the single egress from the very narrow lane at Ashlands Grove. The mitigations proposed then for Swingate Lane and the no right turn at the traffic lights was widely condemned. Swingate Lane and Hall Park residents opposed any prospect of a through route to the A41. In fact, a bus gate had been proposed in one of our previous submissions, thanks to a member of our working party. There was a strong concern about the infrastructure shortages from GPs, drinking water, lack of capacity at the sewage plant, and overloaded foul water drains at the foot of the valley. The officer report has arguably addressed how this revised scheme complies on policy matters, including prematurity. Some residents may come to a different judgment, while many, including colleagues, question the traffic models and mitigations proposed. I don't have enough time to discuss these. However, the application before the committee has evolved to show how the site might be developed. The list of items in the section 106 provides some assurance on funding for improvements to the wider infrastructure. In fact, there are 2 zebra crossings that we are proposing for Ashton School, outside Ashton School, which appear to be missing. It would be helpful to have those included in the scheme if it goes ahead. In view of the sewage capacity issue, I question whether the trigger of 340 dwellings or 50% of the site is set too high. This revised outline scheme has not been to our planning committee, but should it be approved, we would expect future reserved matters to be subject to the usual consultations. For the record, Berkhamsted's local housing needs, as advised by consultants for our emerging neighbourhood plan, is 40 affordable homes per annum. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens, and thank you for keeping so well to time. I'll now call Councillor Nigel Taylor, who's speaking as a ward councillor. Councillor Taylor, as a ward councillor, you have 5 minutes. It's not compulsory to take the full 5 minutes. So when you're ready.
Yet again, I find myself here to discuss another large planning application by a developer, and I'm giving a similar speech to the last time. While I can understand their motivations, we need a solution that addresses the need of our community in the long term. By long term, I mean long after the developer has gone, while we as local councillors still hope to be serving the residents of our community. My primary concern for any development in Berkhamsted is how will traffic be handled. Historically, developers have been allowed to add more and more houses to the town, with no thought about the overall impact on traffic in the town. The result is we do not have a road layout so much as a random set of streets which are incapable of handling the current traffic levels. The result is we have a very limited number of routes through the town. Virtually all the routes converge on the High Street, and normally the junction of King's Road with the High Street is the most heavily impacted. I have received complaints from residents on virtually all the through routes in the town about traffic levels. The result is regular traffic jams, especially in the rush hour, excessive noise and speed for the rest of the time. At various times, the developers of this application have put forward various proposals for the junction of King's Road with the High Street, including banning right-hand turns at the junction or removing the traffic lights altogether and letting chaos reign. All these proposals are totally unacceptable to the residents and myself. The town is in a valley, which in places is very steep. The development is at the top of the hill. Most new residents will not use active travel, they will get in their cars. The report makes a number of claims about traffic levels that the development will generate. I do not have time in 5 minutes to give a detailed analysis of the limitations of the report and the forecast travel levels. However, I would like to thank Anthony Habinger for the many analysis you produced of the report. And I can only say that the many assumptions in that report are extremely optimistic about the level of car journeys that will be generated. In practice, they will be far higher and they will concentrate at the busy times of day. We have seen this before. The question is, will we let it happen again? Now, you may think this is a problem for Berkhamsted, but it is a pattern that is growing in all parts of the borough and indeed the county. We are a rural county that is rapidly being urbanised without the infrastructure to support it. The problems I have described may be worst in Berkhamsted, but it represents the shape of things to come for all Dacorum and many other parts of Hertfordshire. Most of our towns were set out before the car was king. They cannot cope with this level of traffic. You may think it is not your problem, as you represent Hemel Hempstead or Tring. However, if the new residents are to work in Hertfordshire, their main route to work will be the A414 through Hemel Hempstead. We should all know what happens to this road in the rush hour. The traffic jams will not be limited to Berkhamsted. They will be shared with all of you and all of your residents. And this jam is not something I wish to share with anyone. This application is premature. It makes insufficient provision for the protection of the town from traffic it will generate. The developers need to go back to the drawing board if they can find a way of making the town's traffic work, and I mean all the town's traffic work, not just the new bits. They will be welcomed, but they should not come back until they have done so. I urge you to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Thank you for keeping to time. I will now call Mr. Jonathan Pillow, who is speaking in support of the application. Mr. Pillow, have you got a microphone that works, first of all?
Right-hand button.
Now's it working?
No, it's confirmed you've got a microphone that works. You've got 3 minutes when you're ready.
Good evening. My name's Jonathan Pillow. I'm a project director at Taylor Wimpey. The site has been a draft allocation since at least 2017, and whilst this application is not reliant on the local plan, its evidence base very clearly supports these proposals. The application is put forward now in the context of your immediate and significant housing shortfall, and the suite of benefits proposed are very substantial, as considered within your own KC reviewed officer's report, which also confirms the site is grey belt in the context of limited green belt contribution. Key benefits include significant housing delivery against a one-year supply position, the over-delivery of affordable housing to 40% with capped rents at a 60% market rate, a ped cycle corridor through the site utilising land secured from Ashland School with Department for Education approval, funding further secondary educational benefits, significant off-site highway and footpath improvements, a sports hub with 3G pitch, courts and pavilion for wider town use, with interest from raiders, paddle operators and some local schools, a dedicated medical centre welcomed by the ICB to be secured in the 106 at their request, a community space welcomed by groups like the Swan Youth Project, and a huge investment by Taylor Wimpey comprising Section 106 and highways package of around 30 million, as well as an estimated SIL contribution of 20 million. The site will be free of gas with all electric net zero carbon ready homes achieving an operational carbon reduction of up to 85%. Noting today's comments, we'd like to reiterate the following confirmed by consultees. Traffic. The access strategy prioritises pedestrians and cycles and has been revised and agreed, achieving the required widths following extensive workshops and independent third-party audit of our modelling instructed by HCC. The proposals include an extensive package of measures, many identified within your own documents for wider town benefit. On education, Herts County have welcomed the primary school land and confirmed it would be safeguarded for when it is needed, avoiding undermining existing schools. And on drainage, the LLFA and Thames Water are both content with our proposals. Thames have actually confirmed existing capacity for 340 homes before any upgrades, which would be at our cost, would have to come forwards. On master planning, the proposals reflect revisions after extensive consultation with your design officers and provide a 65% open space over provision. Design is tightly controlled through parameter plan tolerances and a design code principles document, and a further full design code and series of housing and infrastructure reserve matters would have to follow, requiring your further approvals. To conclude, the application provides substantial benefits and investment into Berkhamsted, and whilst I recognise there are concerns, the extensive engagement process and the formal amendments made have led to all statutory consultees, including Heritage and others, and your own officers being satisfied with the proposals on this grey belt site. And as such, respectfully, we ask that you follow your officer's recommendation and support this scheme. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping to time. Now it's over to the committee for questions and comments. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Yes, Councillor Jankowski, then Councillor Anderson. Did I see your hand up? Councillor Jankowski, then Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a quick question around your views on sort of the prematurity of the application. I think I've heard it a few times, and indeed from residents in my inbox, that sort of thing. Yeah, particularly and what powers we might have to sort of defer until after examination of the local plan. Thank you.
Okay, so there are certain scenarios whereby planning permission could be refused on the grounds of prematurity, and they are set out in the incorrectly referenced paragraphs that I referred you to earlier. So it's actually paragraph 50 and 51 of the MPPF. However, officer's opinion is concluded that none of those are met. This application is not of a scale that is central to the local plan. The local plan timeframe is unknown. So in terms of the speed at which it might become adopted, that is unknown. The extent of our housing shortfall in the borough is extensive, and that would outweigh, in officer's opinion, any objections to those local plan. In addition, as was pointed out, this application isn't reliant on the housing allocation. This is a greenbelt application whereby very special circumstances have been demonstrated to exist. So it's not relying on that site allocation. So officers conclude that granting of planning permission wouldn't undermine the local plan process. Therefore, in our opinion, there wouldn't be a sound reason for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. On that very same point, I wanted to remind colleagues quite clearly, despite what we've heard this evening, prematurity is not a material planning consideration. That has been established for some years now. I remember when I first started it was an issue, but it is not now. However, the existing core strategy and existing policies are material considerations. And I really wanted to ask the officer about this issue of prematurity in terms of government has made it quite plain that its policies, it wants to see plan-led development. I don't actually have the paragraphs to hand, but there's been more than numerous occasions when the government has made it absolutely crystal clear that it wants to see plan-led developments occurring. So my first question on prematurity is to the officer is could you come back on whether it's already been advised that the officers feel that there isn't a case, but I do want to push quite hard on that specific element of government policy. And there's another point to prematurity, which I'll come back to once you, if I may, Chair.
So like you've correctly said, the application would need to be determined in accordance with our development plan. However, the policies most important to this application are out of date in that they're not consistent with the MPPF. So the development plan that we have is out of date. Therefore, the policies of the MPPF are therefore given more weight. And they're the ones, and like I say, the policies that I quoted in 50 and 51 in terms of prematurity are to deal with this situation whereby the new local plan is still emerging. So that is a consideration that we do have to take. So it is a material consideration in that the development plan that we have is out of date in terms of the housing policies. Therefore, the tilted balance and the prematurity argument would come into play.
I'm sorry, I was trying to separate prematurity from the tilted balance. But the other point to bear in mind is, I think there's an observation here. I don't think I could describe 400 houses as being immaterial to the local plan. This is quite significant, even if it is or isn't an allocation. It is a large development. And I also have an interesting question here that if the committee refused permission and the applicant, goodness knows how much money they spent planning on this, was to appeal, would the planning inspectorate be able to actually consider an appeal because it's already been considered through the local plan process?
Can you just repeat the end of that? So because it hasn't gone through the local plan process yet, has it? That's still emerging, so it hasn't
Yeah,
been examined. So the planning inspector would have to determine it the same way that we are in terms of policies that we've applied is what the planning inspector would equally assess it against.
So you're saying you'll have two different parts of the planning inspectorate considering the same scheme at the same time?
But the planning inspector isn't considering this scheme when it's examining the local plan. It's examining the site allocation alongside all the other site allocations and the green belt release.
As part of a plan-led approach, but I'm just wondering about the practicality. Anyway, we'll park that. That's not, I think that's an agree to disagree situation. Unless Philip wants to chip in.
Well, first of all, I believe prematurity is material planning consideration. It is quoted in the MPPF, which is material planning consideration, and does indicate it could be a reason for refusal, though as Brian has indicated, is very rarely used. And yes, if members refused and it went to appeal, the planning inspectorate would be obliged to consider that appeal, because this scheme is not reliant on the local plan. It's a green belt proposal that needs to be considered against the very special circumstances of the case, so it can be considered in isolation. And just as members are doing this evening, the planning inspectorate would be obliged to do the same in the event of an appeal.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I continue, Chair?
You certainly can, Councillor Anderson. I see Councillor Allen's indicating, so yeah. I've got you down as the next speaker, Councillor Allen. So carry on, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I've got two other points, but I'll just do one of them first. And I think it's important, I would like members of the public specifically to be aware that this committee does not have the right to overturn the highways advice it receives from the Highway Authority. Much as there are times when this committee wants to overturn the highways advice because of significant differences of opinion previously, we just cannot do that unless we actually have the evidence to do so. And this, again, is going to be very unpopular with the audience, but I do have to question the practicality of constructing a cul-de-sac that's nearly a mile long for 400 houses in a primary school with no other car access. I can't get my head round this idea of the bus gate and whatever, the sustainability restrictions. I just need to understand how those arose and just how much they have to be set in stone as part of the advice that this committee is receiving, because I just can't see how that could work. It does seem very poor from the design point of view.
Thank you. Brian, Phil, would you be able to answer Councillor Anderson's questions?
Thank you, Chair. Also this evening, we do have James Dale from Hertfordshire County Council Highways. So if we can defer the highways question to James, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I'm clear about what the question was actually, and so I think the fundamental point is: can you serve 400 residential units from a single access of this nature? And our assessment is yes, it does work. It also serves as a bus route through the site. The bus gate is there to link to Gate Lane. So there's a route through for pedestrians, as Brian said in the introduction. So pedestrians and cyclists and the buses can move through the site, through all the different parcels of land are all connected with what we can assess as one of the highest quality internal kind of layouts for cycling, walking. And also the community centre, the community facility would be where the bus gate is. So that's always a central point for one of the main transport hubs as well, for all the facilities there. So you kind of picture the scene, the community centre, the area just to the south of Gate Lane will form all the kind of central facilities. And then there'll be the single access through to Chesham Road, and a separate walking, cycling, segregated route that will run continuously. So it's in our design guidance. Historically, 300 units is a threshold before
and that's a flexible threshold. That threshold was effectively removed in recent planning guidance. And so with a view of this layout, we feel it's perfectly acceptable to have the access serving the 400 units in this kind of, well, the overall layout.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Anderson?
Yes and no. Thank you, Chair.
So it's Councillor Allen, then Councillor Bromham.
Thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding what Councillor Anderson said about the advice we've had about the transport, there's been a lot of comment made by speakers this evening about challenging the transport numbers, and I just wanted to find out your views on those challenges. You know, is there anything legitimate within those challenges that we need to be aware of and taking into account?
Just before you come in, James, because you won't know, the comments that you provided for Bragg are in the addendum. So some of the concerns raised in terms of the modelling, the answers given are from highways. So some of those are already in your addendum. Sorry, James.
Yeah, no problem. I think from our point of view, I think it's worth putting into context, because obviously we've heard a lot of comment about the highways assessment. I think from a prospective point of view, how the highway authority and ultimately the inspector will assess the impact of the trip generation on the surrounding network is one of, they assess what the actual impact is that's directly attributed to the development. So we've heard already that we're well aware that Berkhamsted is a congested network. During peak times, there's a number of junctions that suffer from congestion. That's clear, and there's no dispute about that. What our assessment is all about is about what does this development add to the traffic, yeah? And so it's the additional element that is then judged to be severe. We've heard the references to severe from MPPF, and it's only purely that element. And so if you were going to be crude about this, if you got a queue of 20 vehicles into the main crossroads of Berkhamsted, and this development adds another 5 to that queue, the judgment is whether that 5 on top of the queue of 20 is a severe impact. That's where the judgment comes in. And our view is, once the modelling has all been done, and all the interventions in terms of the sustainability packages and all the other routes and everything we can possibly link to this to make this a sustainable development, the residual traffic as a feature of the existing traffic does not represent in itself the severe impact test. It doesn't fall foul of that test. So that's where we are on as a general point.
Thank you. Councillor Allen, does that answer your question?
Yes, it's very helpful. But, you know, part of the taking away the pressure on, particularly at Kings Road Junction, is this no right turn feature, which of course is going to take some of the traffic away from this development. Yet the received wisdom within the town is that the no right turn is going to cause a significant amount of traffic on side roads and residential roads, and that this isn't really a solution for the town. But any comments on that?
Yes, certainly. I'm well aware that the sensitivities around trying to address the problem with the Kings Hill Junction and the High Street. The modelling exercise carried out by the applicant highlighted a number of junctions in the vicinity that were operating well over capacity, and the additional traffic obviously made them worse. The modelling identified, as I say, a series that were particularly poor functioning in operation. The Kings Hill Way and the High Street Junction was one of those, Shooters Way being the other one. And then obviously the other Kings Hill junction at the top of the roundabout near the Chesham Road junction. The solution of removing the right turns on each of the high street approaches is a technique that where you obviously, you've probably seen the drawings, where you take away one of the lanes leading in because you don't need the right turn lane any longer because you've taken the manoeuvre out, and you can dedicate the additional space to the pedestrian environment. Okay, so that's where that comes in. Obviously, the displaced traffic from that manoeuvre is going to take that manoeuvre somewhere else, and it's about understanding what that impact is. So there's obviously concerns about that, and we've got the same concerns. Then there's another option that we were investigating as part of the consultation process, and that's something slightly more radical, and where it's been used elsewhere, and we felt that Berkhamsted Town Centre had the right characteristics that type of measure might be successful, and that's the one we've heard about this evening, about removing the traffic lights and changing the environment into one more of a relationship between the pedestrian and the driver by taking a lot of the space away from the drivers. It sounds, we've heard criticism this evening that this will be chaos and all the rest of it. It's worked elsewhere, and it's an option that the applicant has sketched up for us, so people can understand what it would look like. And more importantly, I suppose, they've priced it up as well in terms of how much that would cost to deliver. That's not to say that would be the option we go forward with, nor would it be the right turn ban. But those are two options that we could bring forward from Herts County Council. To be clear, this is one of the few ones where there's a financial contribution payable to the local highway authority. So HCC would take the financial contribution and would therefore own the scheme. And therefore would go through, it would be our scheme, which would go through the usual project validation, and also all the other consultations and the design processes, which would engage all the community anyway. So that's where it is. All the two options you've seen are that. They're just two options, feasible, we think at this stage, just from looking at them. But no doubt there's a load more phases to go through before you deliver a scheme of either of those natures, or one we haven't identified yet that may come out of that process.
Thank you. Are your questions answered now, Councillor Allen?
I do have another one, if I may.
You may indeed.
So there's been reference made to pedestrian safety, particularly on outside Ashland School. Is that something that this is going to be remedied within this application?
Yeah, there's an extended, there's quite an extensive scheme that has been developed in consultation with HCC in terms of from the roundabout at the top end by A41 all the way down through Hilltop Road. So there is a scheme that addresses that widens the footway on the development side all the way down continuously, and also. It introduces a series of crossings, and junction changes, very much focused on the safety around the school, but also linking all of the various connections along Chesham Road to make it more pedestrian and cycling focused. That's one of the easier ones to tackle. So yeah, it's a really good scheme, that one. We're pleased with that one.
Thank you. Councillor Bromham, you've been waiting so patiently, so it's over to you.
Thank you. I've got two questions, but they don't have to be consecutive. So like so many developments in Decorum, they seem to be quite dependent on improvements in active and sustainable travel. And I think you just mentioned that the pedestrian safety outside Ashland School would be improved, which is very welcome. I'm wondering what the frequency of, the likely frequency of buses going down to the town centre and the Berkhamsted station is likely to be, and also whether the paths will be improved. For example, the one parallel to Fieldway, I think it's called Garden Field Way, and does that connect up with the LC WIP plans to make safe travel? I know that, you know, a lot of people have got electric bikes now, so hopefully a lot of people would get to the station that way, even though there's quite a big hill to come back up again.
So before we go any further, Brian and Phil, are those material planning considerations? Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Barman.
I think that concludes my question. The frequency of buses and the degree of improvement to the active travel network, including whether Garden Field Way will be properly surfaced, because it's quite rough and muddy at the moment.
I'll answer that second question while James just finds the bus info. So on the map above, you can see the purple element on the very edge of Fieldway. So that is Garden Field Lane, and that's where the improvements and the upgrade works would happen. And equally on the cycle route at the bottom in the yellow that's on London Road, that's where there would also be off-site improvements. So Garden Field is the purple that you can see there, and the yellow is on London Road for the cycle enhancements. Sorry, James, I'll head over to you for the buses.
No, that's right. Yeah, that Garden Field Way is an upgraded, and then as you say, down to link eventually over a control crossing down and ultimately over to the canal, into the town centre that way. Buses, yes. Our passenger transport team have been engaged with the process. We've been the picture of buses has changed slightly between Chesham and Hertfordshire, and so they've put forward a design of a service that would serve, so two services would I've written down, I think it's a half hourly service between Chesham and Hertfordshire station, and then another service, I think hourly, that goes to Aylesbury, from Chesham to Aylesbury through the site. So there's two services working together there, and in addition, you have Herts Links operating in Dacorum from 2023. There's also flexibility in the contribution, which I think stands at about 2.2 million, that would go towards ensuring that Herts Links was part and parcel of this, with the virtual stop within the site. Certainly in the early days, and so will remain there as well. So you have the two timetable services running through the site, but you will also have the Herts Link to supplement any other local requirements.
So reading between the lines, that sounds as though during commuter peak time there'll probably be 4 services an hour.
It's a comprehensive bus service that's been designed and going to be paid for by the developer. It's designed around about a 5-year supplement contribution. That's the same as any financial contribution towards buses. As you know, it's to pump prime the service, to get the patronage up, to reduce the reliance on the supplementary kind of injection of cash, to ultimately make it commercially viable. So as I say, it's something that our passenger transport guys have been working on. They're familiar and obviously experienced with putting these things together, and they're happy with the offer.
Thank you. I hope the new franchise bus services will improve this frequency, because it's desperately needed in other areas as well.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Just one other question I had from earlier. Well, first off, one observation to say that I welcome the 10-metre buffer for the sake of the new residents that we saw in one of the slides, but I would make a plea at this stage, if this is granted tonight, that buffer actually is watched and happens, because experience has shown, particularly with the Manor Estate and Hertfordshire, that 10-metre buffers tend to get forgotten about when developers start running out of money. My question is related to one of the earlier slides, which showed that there were a lot of leisure facilities provided next to Chesham Road. Oh no, I hope I'm not imagining things. And again, I keep coming back to this point that that's about as far away from the new housing as you could possibly put it. I'm just wondering how and why that's been proposed again at the other end of the cul-de-sac that we're being asked to approve.
So in terms of your first question, there is a condition that I'm madly trying to find in relation to the acoustic fence itself and the landscaping. And the reason for that is because it is so important that that landscaping mitigation is successful. We do require the details of that. I'm just trying to find it. I think it's condition 27, but it's management and 27, isn't it? 27, and then so the bottom bullet point there in terms of the landscaping, it says the management and maintenance details for the lifetime of the development. So that landscaping buffer will be expected to be there for the lifetime of the development. So like I say, that condition 27 specifically asks for the landscaping details and the planting plan for that barrier. So hopefully that offers you some assurance and some comfort there. The second question, I think, was in relation to the sports provision on the paddock. Was it on the relation? So my understanding of why it's been positioned there is because the idea is it serves the whole of the community, so it can be easily accessed off of Chesham Road. It's got its own parking provision there indicatively to the top of the site there. So the idea is because it's not just to serve the existing residents, it's easily accessible for all the residents, whether or not they be cycling, walking or driving is an accessible position. Also ties in quite conveniently with the playing fields of Berkhamsted School and Ashland. So if the school need to use those for extra provision as part of community use agreement or whatever, then that would be in walkable distance for those pupils as well. So that's my understanding why it's almost deliberately been designed to be there, so it's accessible for the whole town rather than just the residents of that development.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? Councillor Bromham.
Just to follow on from those last comments, who will actually be responsible for maintaining that acoustic barrier during the lifetime of the development, which hopefully will be a century?
So that is yet to be decided, but that is the detail of that will be required by condition. So again, the condition 27 asks for all those landscaping details. So it asks for all of that, and then it's management and maintenance details. I assume, but it's yet to be resolved, and it would be resolved by the Section 106. There would be a management or maintenance company for presumably most of the landscaped areas and the open spaces. So it may well be that it's the same company, but that would be resolved at a later date. But the maintenance and the management for the lifetime of development is hopefully covered by condition 27.
Councillor Bromham, you look like you want to come back there, do you?
No, thank you. Another topic, briefly, that we're very concerned about the quality of development and the environment and climate change and so on. This is an environmental impact assessment site, and that's intention to put in modern features like mechanical ventilation and heat recovery in the homes and high standards of insulation with triple glazing and so on. The core strategies do mention they encourage heat networks, and they also mention heat stress. And
Councillor Bromham, could you get to the point and ask your question or make your point, please?
So the modern implementation is a Generation 5 ambient temperature heat network, which is particularly relevant to high density, such as schools and care homes. Will heat networks be considered as part of this development?
They're not part of the current proposals, but there is a condition, and I'm desperately trying to find it to be as quick as I can, that requires full details of the energy statements and the
18.2 and 18.16 of the core strategy.
No, sorry, I'm looking at the conditions. There's a condition that requires energy statements, because this is an outline application, the detail of it would come at reserve matters, but there is a condition that requires energy statements and sustainability statements to set out how the development would meet the energy statements submitted now. But my understanding is at this stage, they're not looking at neighbourhood energy, but they are looking at plot specific. I'm madly trying to find the condition. Have you found it, Phil?
No, my understanding is that there's that has been explored, but due to kind of the necessary economies of scale for such a neighbourhood energy scheme, and also the ground conditions, that it wasn't deemed suitable in this instance. But as the case officer's report has described, in any case, that this is a highly sustainable proposal before members in terms of mechanical ventilation and the fabric of the building. It's going far in excess of current building regs. So yes, members can be assured that this would be a high-end standard in terms of sustainability, even if it doesn't use that particular route that you've described. Thank you.
And it was condition 10, if you want to read that at your leisure.
Thank you. The officer recommendation is to delegate with a view to approval. So is there a proposer for the officer recommendation? Proposer in Councillor Anderson.
Hold on, I've got to speak before I get...
Right, you'd like to speak first.
Before I get nailed to a lamppost somewhere.
Speak first.
Chair, I have served in this council for some years. I was part of a long-running administration that fought Grand Union Investments when they owned this land, if I've got the right bit of land, which involved all sorts of legal challenges. Our local plan was challenged legally, and somehow we got through that and we managed to conserve this bit of the green belt. Times have moved on, and I think we're now in a very, very difficult position. I would love to move refusal of this application because it's inappropriate development in the green belt, conflicts with purposes A, C and E, and has a very obvious impact on the openness of the green belt and the visibility. But one has to balance that against when you look at the maps and the plans that have been shown, when is sprawl infill and when is infill sprawl? It depends which way you're looking at it. I also dislike intensely not being able to dismiss this on the grounds of prematurity, because I do think it should be tested via the local plan process. But I keep coming back to this tilted balance, and the precedent's been set that we are losing applications like this left, right and centre because the planning inspector had taken one look at our housing supply and deciding that that trumps everything. And I'm afraid the bottom line is that I feel that the authority cannot afford to refuse permission on this. So it is through gritted teeth and immense sadness that I have to propose the officer's recommendation. And by the way, I dislike intensely the idea of a 1 mile cul-de-sac. I really do. But again, we cannot, as I said earlier, we're not in a position, we're not entitled to question the highways advice unless we've got sufficient evidence. And I don't think we've met that test. Thank you, Chair.
We have a proposer in Councillor Anderson. Is there a seconder? Seconder in Councillor Riddick. So all in favour of the officer recommendation to delegate with a view to approval, please raise your hands. That's 4 in favour. All against, please raise your hands. All abstentions, please raise your hands. So that, I actually counted 3 abstentions, 4, I counted 4 in favour, no against, 3 abstentions. So that is delegated with a view to approval. Then it is 20 to 9, and there are a lot of people here, so I'll adjourn the meeting for 10 minutes for everyone to leave the chamber and for members to have a comfort break. Then Councillor Stevens will be resuming the chair for the next item.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, members, let's resume. Item 5B, 01194, change of use of land from equestrian to mixed use at Markyate. We have a number of speakers, but we have to go through the planning application again. It was deferred last time. Robert, over to you.
Yeah, so I'll go through the slides pretty quickly on this one. Obviously, it was deferred from the meeting on the 16th to provide more information in regards to the potential for conflicts with policy 22 of the core strategy and concerns around the concentration of Gypsy and traveller sites in Markyate and the concerns with regards to access and highway safety matters. So if we could go on to the first slide. See, the site is located on the northeastern side of the A5138. It was proposed to put a single static home and a touring caravan in addition to an existing stable building that has been constructed in a different location to its approval and with slightly different fenestration details. If we move on to the next slide. So the approved scheme for the stabling is obviously located up in the top left-hand corner. You'll see the stable located pretty close to the junction of Green Lane and hard standing extending alongside that. From that, obviously, yes, it's been built out. The stable has been located further into the sides and the hard standing has been extended. These are the approved elevations of the proposed stable and the existing proposed elevations. So they're seeking to retain, as you can see, the changes involve some changes to the windows and doors, but there's no material change in the size of that building. Again, in terms of the floor plans, you've got a reduction in hard standing associated with that building. And changes, again, change the openings, but essentially it comprises a single stall, WC and feed store area. These are the site photos. So it's a view from Green Lane of the hedging along the southern boundary of the application site and a view from as you turn up Green Lane of the application site itself. So you've got an access that was formed into the site lawfully, the hedgerow and some fencing. And again, there's the access onto that site. So you've got some closures, you've got the extension of the hard standing and the stable building as constructed. One of the concerns obviously raised previously was in relation to approved highway works. So just to confirm, these are the approved works that were subject to consultation in the area. They essentially comprise in the vicinity of the application site a slight widening and signalisation of the junction onto the A5, also the introduction of pedestrian crossings there too. It does not extend to the provision of a no entry sign, as was indicated previously, although recent consultations have been undertaken and expired on the 24th of November for the County Council in relation to the proposals to restrict movement down Old Watling Street, essentially. These are shown on the next slide. So essentially, you would have a no entry at the north western side end of Old Watling Street, and close to the junction with Green Lane. So that would be a no entry, but entry would remain effectively via River Hill and via the old Watling Street to the application site. And the Highway Authority have confirmed that that would not have any material impact on access by the applicants and the caravans onto that application site. So they still view that as being a satisfactory access to the development. And again, that's the proposed site plan that's before you today. So members are considering the retention of effectively changes to the stable building, plus the addition of a single static caravan and the provision of a touring caravan to be located on that site. Thank you, Chair.
We have a number of speakers. Shall I call Councillor Selma Hackney first?
No,
Parish Councillor?
it will be Mr. Vehicular first. I'm speaking for myself and my friend Deborah Blow, so it will be a 5-minute slot for us because we are both speaking, but I'm speaking on her behalf to give you our combined views. You've got 3 minutes up there. If you could please change it to 5.
Right. Fine. Okay.
Thank you very much. I am a resident of Old Watling Street. I'm a lawyer and a specialist in judicial review. I would like to address you on 3 matters, please, if I may. The first matter actually relates to what this application is for. It says it's the change of use of land from equestrian to a mixed-use equestrian and gypsy traveller site. That itself is wrong. It is no longer equestrian land. Robert concedes that in his submissions to you, and then he tries to skirt over the issue by saying, yes, it's lapsed to agricultural, but there's a fallback position in respect of the application. I'm not sure what the fallback application is. He doesn't articulate it, but as a point of law, you cannot apply for one thing, you have to do it again. So I'd submit that as far as this is concerned, it would be like me applying for insurance, saying I've got a full license, then saying to the insurance company, oh, by the way, I only had a provisional license, you'll still insure me, won't you? Well, so no, fill out a new proposal form. It's as simple as that. Don't be swayed by, oh, well, let's sort it all out. Things have got to be done properly. And this should fail at the first step. Second, this matter has already been addressed, and I've read the minutes. And the minutes are very clear. The minutes say there were 4 people for, 5 against, and an abstained. And then it's rather bizarre what happened. It's almost Putinesque. We didn't like the result we got, so let's call these poor councillors who haven't heard it before again to hear it as a new application. On any analysis, that is an abusive process and will be subject to judicial review. Third then, and they should be sufficient, let's actually address the application. The application itself is based on the fact that this somehow is greenbelt land. Robert admits that in the first place, it is not previously developed land, so that threshold isn't met. So he tries to get it into the definition of any other land. Now, you could go to Hansard and look at what all of this entailed. I don't think it is, but let's assume, for the avoidance of doubt, this falls within the definition of grey belt. Even if it falls within the definition of grey belt, it has to be subject to preserving the green belt. And the purpose C of the green belt is to safeguard the countryside from encroachment. So you have to fulfill paragraphs 110 and 115 of the NPPF, which are all about sustainability and all about access. Old Watling Street doesn't do that. Then let's look at unmet need. Unmet need. Robert very cleverly ignores the fact that there's only been one published GTAA, and that GTAA said there were 20 sites were required. He's usurping your control by relying on an assessment that says there might be a potential need of 71. That has never been agreed. He's being judge and jury and saying you need 71. You don't. The law says you need 20, and that's what Hemel have provided. So it should fail on that basis. There are now no longer any special circumstances in play here, which then brings us to what you should do. We all feel very sorry for the travellers. What this is about is what the law says. And Robert has been given a copy of the case of Ward, doesn't tell you about it, and you were asked last time, what are your reasons? I will tell you your reasons, because that's what and your reasons, to quote Lady Justice Lang, are, the proposed development would, by definition, be harmful to the Greenbelt, and I attach substantial weight to the harm to the Greenbelt, having regard to the policy in the framework. The proposal would also result in harm to the openness of the Greenbelt. The benefits of the other considerations do not clearly outweigh this harm. Consequently, there are no very special circumstances necessary to justify inappropriate development in the Greenbelt, whether on a permanent or temporary basis, and there are no violation of the human rights issues on this occasion.
Time's up. I think you've rather abused the 5 minutes. There was two of you to speak for 5 minutes. Chair.
We said we were doing it together.
No. Now, the next speaker, going back to the beginning, Councillor Hackey.
I would like to address the points raised in the officer's report. The site was originally Greenbelt and has been reallocated as Greybelt. Greybelt policy requires land to be of poor quality and previously developed. This land was always agricultural land with no development until the stables were erected in July 2024. Stables which breach the original plans and are not in the approved location. They are unused, they never have been, and can hardly be described as a sympathetic addition. Greybelt is not a free pass for development. Policy states openness must be fundamentally protected, as set out clearly in paragraphs 137, 149 to 152 of the NPPF. Highways and access remain a serious concern. Decorum zone policy requires safe access to primary road networks. This site does not meet that standard. Despite highways stating that there are no grounds for objection, this is incorrect. Green Lane is a single track road, not suitable for manoeuvring caravans or mobile homes. It sits directly at the junction with Old Watling Street, itself a narrow and residential lane. The road is gated and intermittently closed and subject to ongoing safety measures that are not yet finalised. The proposed changes will only add to the already congested A5183 and do nothing to address access into the site itself. Despite the application being for one touring caravan and one static mobile home, the presence of 6 water taps, 2 septic tanks and numerous standpipes is understandably causing serious concern. Experience has shown that sites can and do expand and appear without permission, as is happening now along the A5183. Paragraph 13, the planning policy for the travellers requires integration and coexistence. Markyate already has multiple sites to the north, 2 new applications for 5 further sites and several more in neighbouring villages. It is simply untrue to claim that this would be the only site associated with Markyate. Residents regularly experience the cumulative impact from all surrounding sites. Decorum zone conditions state that sites should be dispersed and not concentrated. Markyate seems to be becoming the default location for such sites, which is unfair, unsustainable, and is for such a small village with already overstretched services. On personal circumstances, the report states that this is a much needed site and suggests that there are no alternatives. This is not supported given the number of existing sites already in the immediate area. Residents' objections have been submitted anonymously due for fear of repercussions, meaning the scale of the opposition is not fully visible. In summary, this application does not comply with Decorum zone policies on Greybelt, highway safety, site dispersal or community impact. With this in mind, how can this site be approved? Thank you.
Thank you for keeping your time. Now, Ward Councillor Timmis, you have 5 minutes.
Good evening. I'm Borough Councillor for Watling Ward, rural ward, comprised of villages, agricultural land, green belt, and area of outstanding natural beauty. This application is off Old Watling Street, the latter being a third of a mile long strip of the original Roman road, separated from the villages of Markyate and Berkhamsted by the A5183. It's quite rural, with agricultural land behind the road with houses in certain areas. I realise that I may be repeating some of the things that have already been said, but that's the way it is because I'm going to reinforce them. I'm just going to expand on 2 or 3 issues with this application, which I feel render it as inappropriate. Number 1, the need for traveller sites. The planning officer states in para 4.8 that there is a total need for 71 pitches plus a further 14 with the amended definition of travellers in decorum. This is the council's own Gypsy and traveller accommodation assessment, but I can find no explanation of how this number is calculated. It seems to have risen astronomically since 2019. In the government policy for traveller sites, it states that local planning authorities should set pitch targets which address local needs in collaboration with neighbouring local planning authorities. Very relevant in this case, as we are on the border with Central Beds. However, you will note that Central Beds declined to provide details of traveller sites along the A5183, which is about 3.5 miles along from Markyate. So let's look at the provision in this area of traveller sites within, say, 4 miles. There are 5 existing sites between Markyate and Dunstable, that's under 3.5 miles, which have not been taken into account. Then there are smaller sites at Caddington, Slip End and Redbourne. Another retrospective application at the other end of Old Watling Street for another 5 static caravan traveller sites and 3 caravans is currently being decided. So there's hardly a paucity of sites in this area. In addition, there is a hotel currently housing approximately 125 immigrants, all young men awaiting a Home Office decision. This is not relevant to this traveller site application on its own, but I think it should be taken in the context of the impact on existing residents of Old Watling Street. Number 2, non-compliance by the applicants. The application is based on a falsehood. It was quite obvious that the applicant had no intention of using the initial application for horses. It was a means to a different end. The planning officer talks about the existing equestrian land use, which he uses as a basis for granting this application, but it is plainly not true. The original development of the stables did not comply with the agreed plans in many ways, an example being putting hardcore much further into the field than was agreed, reducing the grazing, such as it was for the fictional horse. The application is for 1 static and 1 travelling caravan. Not excessive, one would think, but then 6 standpipes were erected in the field. For what? For just 1 static and 1 travelling caravan, I suggest there might be an alternative long-term motive. Number 3, adjusting the green belt policy to fit the requirements of the planning application. The official planning policy for traveller sites states that these sites are inappropriate in the green belt. The planning officer justifies the acceptance of what is an inappropriate development by renaming this piece of green belt grey belt so that it's okay. It should be noted that the environment survey by Herts County Council was not able to be done, as the site had been razed to the ground before the first application. Originally, it was a wooded area, so I would suggest that any harm has already been done. Finally, therefore, for the reasons of unproven, unevidenced need, impact on the local residents, and the redefining of green belt, I ask you to reject this application, not for the first time, but for the second time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping to time. Philip, you look as if you want to say something.
Thank you, Chair. There's just a couple of initial points. Obviously, leave the member debate in terms of the green belt and the other arguments. But there was a couple of initial kind of legal points raised in terms of, first of all, the fallback position. I think the questions before members in that regard is there planning permission in place for the equestrian use? Yes, there is. Is that planning permission capable of being implemented? Yes, it is. And so has that use been abandoned in any way? No, it hasn't. So therefore, officers view that this is a fallback position in terms of the lawful use of the site. And the second legal point raised was in respect of an abusive process, because this item is returning to committee and effectively it's a kind of a second bite of the cherry, I think the argument is. Ultimately, no decision was made at the last committee. The officer's recommendation wasn't passed at that time, but no decision on the application was made. Members concluded ultimately that they required additional information, and therefore the decision for members tonight is, in light of that additional information, they are therefore allowed to reconsider the officer recommendation. There was a Supreme Court decision that dealt with deferred planning applications and whether committee members would be entitled to vote on an application when it returns if they weren't present in the first committee. But that court decision relates to a specific example where Tower Hamlets had in their constitution that members couldn't come back and vote on the return, couldn't vote on the return if they hadn't been there on the first application. So my understanding, and Adele can correct me if I'm wrong, that there is no such provision for a deferred in our constitution. And in any case, I believe all committee members in this room were at the previous committee except Councillor Anderson. So thank you, Chair. Hopefully that's helpful.
We've heard that the stables don't seem to have been used, and we've heard that the gravel is inappropriate for equestrian use, and that multiple water supplies have been installed. And I did visit the site today, and I saw there was a pile of gravel, kind of suggesting that I didn't actually see the water supplies myself, but I did simply see a bit more gravel, suggesting that hard area might be extended. I note that the core strategy 22D says that a new accommodation for gypsies and travellers, new sites will be planned to allow for part occupation initially, allowing subsequent growth to full site capacity. It might be useful if the officer could confirm whether that would generally need additional permission, but there is a lot of concern about overcrowding of caravan sites, especially considering the disastrous fire that we had on the similar site in Redbourne recently. But I do note that on the application, on the recommendation, condition 1 is that the development would be a single pitch and have no more than 2 caravans. So that seems to make it crystal clear that it would be a severe infringement of a planning permission if more caravans were put on the site. So I'd appreciate it if the officers could clarify that such an enforcement would take place in that if more caravans were added.
Yes, indeed. We can only determine the application that is before us, and that is essentially for a single gypsy and traveller pitch in addition to a stable block. Obviously, any additional buildings on that site would require planning permission in their own right and would need to be judged accordingly.
Thank you, Chairman. This item was deferred to get information on distribution of gypsy and traveller sites in the vicinity of Markyate. and safety works on the 5183, the access to the site, and on the layout and design. Those have come to this committee. They're in the report which we have in front of us. And turning to this green belt versus grey belts thing, am I right in thinking that grey belt isn't just previously developed land, but it's land that doesn't contribute strongly to purposes A, B, and D of including land in the green belt? It doesn't contribute strongly to preventing large areas of urban sprawl or preventing towns, and specifically towns, not villages, merging into each other. And it doesn't contribute strongly to preserving the setting of historic towns. It's towns rather than villages.
Indeed. The definition, obviously, of grey belt land within the MPPF it doesn't essentially allow other land that doesn't fall within purposes A, B, and D to be considered as grey belt, provided it's not strictly limited to, I think, as one of the members of the public mentioned, poor quality land. That's a misunderstanding. It's a common misunderstanding amongst people when they talk about grey belt land, to some extent promoted on the original basis what grey belt land was said to be, as distinct from the definition that actually got included within the MPPF. Say the MPPF definition makes no reference at all to land quality.
So Councillor Timmis highlighted the availability of Gypsy and traveller sites beyond Hertfordshire's borders. Is that something that can be taken into account?
Well, the officer report obviously talks about the overconcentration of Gypsy and traveller provision. We did ask Central Beds for comment. They wouldn't declare information on freedom of information basis, but what you can see is from their Gypsy and traveller evidence base that there is a significant proportion of Gypsy and traveller sites in and around the immediate vicinity of Caddington. It is not an unreasonable conclusion, I would say, to say that these sites are generally would look towards Caddington for their services. The other additional point I would make on that is obviously our demand for the Gypsy and traveller sites within decorum should be spread and dispersed around decorum. In this regard, the provision of a single pitch, additional pitch in Markyate would be proportionate to the level of housing that we would anticipate Markyate to perform, to have more generally, as set out in the distribution of the housing table, aid to the core strategy. For these reasons, obviously, I do consider that we are dispersing Gypsy and traveller sites in accordance with planning policy, although I appreciate others may take a different view.
And a question was raised about the accessibility of a single track lane being suitable for large, mobile houses and low loaders or whatever is needed to get them onto the site. Can these the proposed dwellings be got to the site?
The advice from the Highway Authority is that there are no objections on the basis of access to the site. I am conscious that we have mobile homes installed further along Old Watling Street without planning permission, so they have been capable of accessing their site via Old Watling Street and have indeed put caravans on the site without permission. I see no reason why the junction of Green Lane cannot be navigated by a caravan.
Yes, thank you. Taking this one stage further, and should this be granted tonight, I think a lot of us sit here and we're all talking about when 2 caravans become 4 and 4 become 6 and 6 become 8 and it becomes a site as opposed to just 2 pitches. Could a condition not be attached to a consent that if more than 2 caravans arrive on this site, then the planning permission is withdrawn and it returns to being an equestrian site for a horse, which actually I question whether it's big enough for that in the first place, but we can't change that, that's been granted. But why can't we put a condition on it that it's 2 caravans and 6 standpipes will never be used? Is that possible?
Yeah, so there is a condition on the planning permission. It's a fairly standardised condition in terms of Gypsy and traveller site. That says the approval shall only extend to a single pitch, which shall have no more than 2 caravans, one static and one mobile, one touring home, as defined in the Caravan Sites and Controlled Development Act and Caravan Sites Act 1968 at any one time. So it is quite clearly conditioned to be used as a single pitch. The other conditions attached to that also go on to say that it can only be occupied by gypsies and travellers. So I think we've got that pretty much covered.
Yeah, I can understand that, but that gets involved in litigation backwards and forwards. Can we not clearly write it that if more than 2 caravans appear, that's it, they lose the consent for the 2 they've got. It's finished, move on. So we cut through all this red tape of backwards and forwards, and they know they're on a tight leash. Should they stray off it, they lose what they've actually been granted. And you know, that might just focus the minds and free up a lot of time for other people to do other things.
Well, my view is quite strongly we could never impose a condition that removes a planning permission that's been granted. As Robert's mentioned, there is a mechanism through enforcement should they breach that condition, and I'm sure there's a lot of there'll be a lot of local residents, etc., that will be keeping a close eye on this. So the enforcement team would be made aware very quickly, and would take the appropriate action depending on the breach of planning control. But a condition that removed planning permission wouldn't meet the tests.
It was only a question, but we all know about enforcement, how long it takes, and sometimes it's very hard to catch an eel, isn't it? They're a bit slippery. Thank you.
Councillor Bronwyn.
Yeah, on the same point, on the core strategy 22D, that new sites should be planned to allow for part occupation, subsequently growing. Does that mean that if this single permission for a single dwelling is granted, that that the site is likely to be filled up?
I think it's specifically policy 22 says that planned sites should be allowed to grow. Other sites should be addressed on the basis of need, and this would be another site. Obviously, it's not a site that's identified in our core strategy or our emerging local plan as a housing site, and make the distinction between the two. That we should obviously, when we're putting sites in the local plan, we should seek to have them operating at maximum capacity, whereas obviously private sites such as this one, it may not be suitable for a more intensive use.
Councillor Addison.
Can I see the photos of the on-site again, possibly? Yeah. And it's been established this isn't PDL, is that right? Or it is PDL?
No, we've specifically said it's not PDL because the building's not been constructed lawfully in accordance with the planning permission. It does nevertheless comprise other land in the greenbelt that doesn't meet purposes.
And it's not materially different from what's been...
I would say the stable alterations are probably not material. Arguably, the additional hard standing might be material, but I don't see that it's harmful to openness, and I don't see that we wouldn't support an application to retain it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to gauge the actual harm, and I'm not seeing a lot. We have to determine the application on its own merits. We can't concern ourselves about what might or might not happen after it's granted, sadly. I can't, again, I feel sorry for those opposed, but I'll move officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. I can't see any material planning grounds for refusing this application, so I'll second the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Right, if there are no further comments, can I have a show of hands in favour of officer's recommendation? 4, 6 in favour. Against? No against. 2 abstentions. Officer's recommendation is carried. Right. The next application is item 5C. Retention of the existing public house, the Anchor at London Road, Bourne End. The case officer is Heather Eadie. Sorry, Councillor Riddick, you're reminding us.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to repeat what I said earlier, that I'm declaring an interest in as much that this particular property lies within my ward. I've not had any communication with the applicants at all, so I come with a completely open mind.
Exactly the same. It's in my ward. I've had no connection with the applicant, and I come with an open mind.
Fine. Thank you. Noted. Heather, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just move straight to the first slide. So this site comprises Grade 2 listed building, the Anchor, and its associated beer garden and parking area, and the site falls within the green belt. So planning permission is sought to construct 2 3-bed dwellings on land to the rear of the existing pub with associated parking and private amenity spaces, and to reconfigure the layout of the existing car park and introduce new soft landscaping. So the application is at committee due to a call-in request that's been received from Councillor Riddick with respect to the principle of the development and on parking grounds. So this slide just shows the existing site block plan. So you can see the Anchor is at the top here, and this area is the car park. And to the bottom of the slide, you can see development along Bourne End Lane. So one of the concerns that's been raised is in relation to parking. So at present, the pub has an informal parking arrangement. So parking will increase or decrease depending on how people utilise the car park. So this image is just a visualisation of how the existing car park is used, and it shows that approximately 16 car parking spaces are currently provided. So this slide just shows the proposed site plan. So you can see the 2 new dwellings at the bottom of the screen here. Both properties would be served by private gardens and 2 off-street parking spaces. And you can also see how the existing car park would be reconfigured and a more formal parking arrangement would be introduced. And there's 16 spaces that would be provided to serve the pub. So these slides just show the proposed street scene plan. So you can see the 2 new houses when viewed from Bourne End Lane. You can see that they've been amended in terms of their height and scale to be more consistent with existing development. This slide shows the proposed street scene plan, but viewing the development from London Road. And you can see the two new houses at the bottom of the screen here would be viewed against the backdrop of existing development along Bourne End Lane. So the next few slides just show the proposed elevation plans. So you can see the front elevation plan on the left and the side elevation plan on the right. And then you can see the rear elevation plan on the left and the side elevation plan as if looking at the dwellings from London Road on the right. So this slide just shows the proposed floor plans. So you can see that both properties would be 3-bed dwellings and all habitable rooms would be served by openings facilitating daylight and outlook. So the next few slides just show site photos. So these are views looking towards London Road. So you can see the pub here and part of the car park. And this is further views of the car park. This is now moving slightly more towards the beer garden. And this is, again, views of the car park, and you can see the beer garden to the rear. And then this is views of the car park again, but looking towards development along Bourne End Lane. So this is the approximate location of the proposed new dwellings. So these photos just show views from London Road. So you would be able to see the development here against the backdrop of properties along Bourne End Lane. And this is looking towards the newer development of Chalk Row. This slide just shows properties along Bourne End Lane to give an idea of existing pattern of development. And this is just to come back to the proposed site plan. So as considered during 9.2 and 9.25 of the committee report, the development is concluded to be acceptable in principle, amounting to the redevelopment of grey-belt land. It's not felt that refusal of the scheme on parking grounds could be sustained, given that in practice there would be no net loss of parking for the pub, and it is recommended that the application be approved as per the recommendation set out in the published report. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Right, we have some speakers. In objection, we've got 3 speakers. In objection, I've got a Jennifer, a Sam Fuller, and a Paul Maddison.
There we go. Cool. As a resident of Bourne End with a young family who represents the view of the local community, I'm here to object the application for the following reasons. 1, greenbelt harm. Your own officer's report confirms that this development causes substantial harm to the openness of greenbelt. The site is not infill, it does not sit within a frontage, and it's not sustainable due to the lack of safe pedestrian access. This means it fails MPPF 154 and 155 and core strategy CS5. The greenbelt test is not met, and by policy alone, this should be refused. Heritage harm. Both the pub and surrounded area contain Grade 2 listed assets. The Conservation Officer raised multiple concerns. The massing dominates the listed pub. The blank gable harms the street scene, and pushing parking back against the pub facade damages its setting. Under MPPF 199 and 202, any level of harm to a listed building carries a great weight and must be outweighed by meaningful public benefit. Pub viability at risk. The anchor is a vital community asset. Future noise complaints are inevitable. This threatens long-term viability, contrary to NPPF 93, which requires councils to protect valued community facilities. Parking and highway concerns. The application relies on an existing car park plan that does not reflect how the car park actually operates today. The pub regularly accommodates more than 16 cars, especially in the summer. The redesigned layout creates tight, impractical bays and pushes cars into Bourne End Lane, a road that's already challenged by poor visibility and narrow geometry. Again, this conflicts with policy 58, CSA and MPPF 110. Overdevelopment. The scheme tries to force 2 3-bed homes onto a combined sloping semi-rural corner plot. It removes openness, reduces amenity space below local standards, and creates a cramped relationship between houses and the pub. This breaches CS 11, 12 and NPPF 130.
Hi, my name's Jenny. I'm the future landlord of the Anchor. The Anchor is a Grade 2 listed building, over 600 years old, and one of the oldest pubs in Hertfordshire, under paragraphs 208 to 212 of the NPP.
Can I just stop you there and put the button on?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi. Shall I start again? The Anchor is a Grade 2 listed building, over 600 years old, and one of the oldest pubs in Hertfordshire. Under paragraphs 208 to 212 of the NPPF, great weight must be given to its conservation. The application places 2 houses within metres of the listed structure and removes a part of his historical curtilage, yet no heritage impact assessment has been submitted. Without it, the committee simply cannot discharge its legal duty to protect this heritage asset. Under the agent of change principle in paragraph 200, it's the developer's responsibility to avoid future conflict with an existing business, especially a heritage asset like this. Yet noise conflict is inevitable, with 2 proposed gardens that back directly onto our beer garden, where activities including live local music, summer trade and large community events such as the village show, and the noise assessment was carried out in December, the quietest month of the year for garden, and does not really reflect the real trading conditions. No alternative access solution has been proposed. The only access to the new houses will be via our pub car park situated on Bourne End Lane, a narrow dead-end road. Our pub relies on weekly dray deliveries, food deliveries, soft drinks and waste collections, and emergency access if needed. These vehicles already need the full width of the lane to turn and manoeuvre. The application removes over half of our car park. If we lose that space, deliveries become impossible, and large vehicles will be forced to reverse onto the main road. No construction management plan has been submitted. There is no space on this site for contractual parking, skips, material, and machinery without blocking our only access. With no assessment of this, how are we expected to trade through a possible 12 to 18 months of construction? The risk to this listed pub is extremely high. This is the Camera Community Pub of the Year 2025 and finalists in the upcoming Hertfordshire Business Awards. 2 pubs a day close in Britain. We need our local government to support us and grow. How can we grow when your development removes the space we need to survive? Sorry.
Thanks. In my part, I'm a resident of Bourne End Lane. Bourne End Lane is on the entrance into the pub itself. In the summertime, that gets extremely busy. People who go to the pub do not park in the pub car park. They park on the pavements, they park up the lane. The image that was shown there does not reflect. There is no pathway after the first half a dozen houses on the left-hand side of that lane. It forces people into the road. It causes problems with vision going out onto the main London road. This would cause even more congestion and danger to people who live in the village. Thank you.
That was close timely. Well done. Thank you. Right. Our next speaker is Mr. Russell, Jake Russell.
3 or 5? 3, okay. I'll try not to keep you long, it's been a long evening. Yes, my name's Jake, I'm here speaking on behalf of the applicants Red Oak Taverns this evening. This application has been the subject of a long and very detailed assessment by your officers, and we welcome their conclusion that planning permission should be granted. I think to start with, the officer concludes that the scheme amounts to appropriate development in the Greenbelt as a result of being grey-belt land. Now, in grey-belt land, openness is no longer a consideration. This is well-trodden ground nowadays in planning and was the subject of a recent court case confirming as such. And I think it's important to note, obviously, in the context of grey-belt land, that we're delivering much-needed housing in the context of the shortfall in housing land supply, which I think is about 1.03 years at this time. I think to pub viability, it's important to note that a detailed viability assessment was carried out by industry specialist Florets, and that has been reviewed in detail by your officers. And the conclusion is that that there's sufficient outdoor space available for the hosting of events and things like that. But crucially, to the point about parking, as per the drawings, as per the drawings illustrate, currently the car park can accommodate 16 spaces at a push, and all 16 spaces are retained. I think just turning to heritage briefly, the Anchor is a Grade 2 listed pub, a nationally important heritage asset, but there are no physical changes proposed to it. The Conservation Officer identified a low level of less substantial harm, which the Council, which officers have agreed, is outweighed by public benefits, including the delivery of housing, the economic uplift from construction and future residents, and importantly, improvements to the pub setting through landscaping and resurfacing of the car park, which will significantly enhance the currently unattractive car parking area. I think on highways, the Highway Authority have raised no objections. Trip generation is negligible, the access operates safely, and sweat path modelling confirms that cars and, importantly, the pub dray can enter, park, and exit in forward gear. Now, I think, as I say, the proposal provides a clearer and better organised parking layout with hard standing and white lining. So I think, in summary, it's a modest scheme, policy compliant, and has been positively recommended by officers. It respects heritage, preserves the economic viability of the pub business, safeguards amenity, improves the appearance of the pub surrounding, and delivers much needed housing on previously developed grey-belt land. And for all those reasons, I respectfully ask members to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for keeping to time. Councillor Allen.
I noticed that two of the statutory consultees, firstly the conservation comments, and there was a comment by another one on noise. So I wanted to know how they had been taken into account, given that two DBC consultees have raised concerns about this site.
So in terms of the Conservation Officer's comments, they've categorised the harm at less than substantial at the lowest level, and in accordance with the MPPF, we then have to balance that harm against the public benefits of the scheme. So I've detailed that assessment in my report, but ultimately it is considered that the public benefits of providing new dwellings, in particular given our housing land supply situation, and the economic benefits that would come from the development in terms of construction and through new people living in the area and contributing to the local economy, those benefits, as well as the benefits in terms of resurfacing the car park and improving the setting of the listed building, together as a package of benefits is considered to outweigh that harm because it is categorised at that lowest level. I think the other point was with respect to noise. So the environmental health team did raise objection to the scheme originally, raising concerns that a noise impact assessment was required. And I relayed this to the agent and one has been submitted. They've reviewed the outcome of this document and they're satisfied that with mitigation, there wouldn't be any adverse impacts in terms of noise. And there is a condition to secure that those mitigation measures are put into place. So I'm satisfied on that basis that there aren't noise reasons to recommend refusal of the scheme.
So, if I may come back, I got the impression that the noise was more, it was a concern that the new householders would be bothered by the noise of the pub. And it's a not uncommon situation that people move in knowing that they're going to be next to a busy pub and willingly take on that. But then later down the line, there might be a new owner who objects to the level of noise, and then the pub starts to get a lot of negative, antisocial behaviour traffic. And in terms of the conservation, the conservation officer was more, I was more struck by the fact that they were concerned that the development would undermine the building's continued use as a pub, and that its continued use as a pub seemed to be, essential for the sort of listing and the heritage value of the building being preserved.
rather than it being converted into a home, which would have a heritage impact on the building. So I don't know what your thoughts are about the potential viability of the business and maintaining a heritage asset as a pub.
Yeah, so this was one of the key concerns that was raised during the course of negotiations through the application process. And in response, a viability report was submitted, considering this exact issue. One of the concerns raised by the conservation officer was to do with how the loss of the rear beer garden and also the loss of the ability to redevelop the car park to provide development in connection with the pub and how that would affect the pub's viability. So all of this has been considered as part of the viability report, and that ultimately concludes that there wouldn't be an adverse impact. So it is something that has been considered, but ultimately I'm satisfied in my view that this issue has been addressed through submission of that report.
Councillor Riddick.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some concerns about this particular application. I think it is gross overdevelopment in a greenbelt situation, which will incur the loss of essential pub car parking and amenity space, which has already been referred to. With regard to the car parking, what has not been indicated as well is the essential disabled parking spaces, which need to be provided with a public facility such as this. And they should have a minimum of 2, as the pub immediately next door also has 2. Now, to provide those 2 spaces, it's going to take out at least one other space in the proposal there, because you need a 1.2 margin around a disabled parking space. So that is the first consideration. And the access is, I know it's an existing access, but it's far too close to the London Road, the A41 road, which is a busy, busy road. And Bourne End Lane itself is incredibly narrow. It's single track at best. And as already referred to, peak times, the overspill parking goes up Bourne End Lane and up on the pavements as well. Causes a lot of problems for local residents. The other thing about the proposal, which is quite interesting, is that the development is actually effectively landlocked, because the 2 proposed houses do not have access direct off Bourne End Lane. It looks as if they would have to come through the existing pub car park. So you can't have that. And another problem is when they have deliveries to the pub with the large brewery lorries, they will either back in there or what have you, but they will cause a massive obstruction, not only for the 2 proposed houses, but even for people trying to get in and out of the car park to access the pub itself. So I think that, you know, this is something which is something I can't support for those particular reasons. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused about the land ownership of this. So this development is within the curtilage of the listed building. Is that right? And the car park is connected to the pub. And so we've got the owner of the land, who presumably is the owner of the pub, applying for some of the land to be developed when the publican is not keen on it. There seems to be a bit of a conflict there. I'm not sure if it's relevant, Chair, but I'm just a bit confused about how this comes about within the curtilage of a listed building.
Philip, is this an issue, a planning issue?
Well, so is the question in terms of whether the ownership of the land is a planning issue, essentially?
Well, we seem to have the landowner sort of in conflict with a tenant on the site, which just seems a bit odd.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think that the test before members is not the conflict between the landlord and the tenant, but more that the test in paragraph 210 of the MPPF in terms of ensuring that the viable use of the pub can continue. So that is the primary test before members this evening.
And I suppose that's my question is we've got a landlord who thinks that there would not be a conflict with the viability, and a tenant who thinks there would. You know, I think if you own a listed building, I own a listed building myself, I think you have a responsibility to be a custodian for the community for that site, and it seems like there's a conflict of custodian mentality within this application, which troubles me. It may not mean that it's got any, you know, that just may mean I have to go home troubled, but, you know, is it, you know, normal that there should be a conflict on this issue within the application itself?
Well, I think it's probably a highly unusual situation where, yeah, the future tenant is concerned about the impact on the business as a result of this planning application. But as I say, the question is, does the proposal, will the proposals have a detrimental impact on the continued viability of the pub? And that is, you know, the speakers have already spoken in terms of there's a noise element to this, there's the parking element, the deliveries element. Officers are satisfied that in terms of parking numbers, that it's what can be achieved on the remainder of the site will be the same as what's there now. And that there's the swept path analysis confirms that the impact on deliveries is acceptable. Yeah, overall that we are accepting the conclusions of that independent or that economic impact assessment that was submitted to officers. So, but yeah, essentially that is the question before members. These aspects of deliveries, noise, parking, in their totality, will they result in a pub that is no longer viable and therefore put to its optimum use?
The next person is Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Really leading on from what Philip just said, I know planning you can't do this, but we'll think it. And that is, you're putting a house, two houses in the car park of a pub, with their gardens facing straight opposite a pub garden. And we all know that at some point there's going to be the conversation, they're very noisy, can you think about the noise? Pub's been there for 600 years. And that it shouldn't be the pub defending them making a noise, it should be the houses respecting the fact they live next door to a pub. But that won't happen. If the car park isn't big enough and the pub can't survive financially, this is one landowner. You can then see what will happen is the pub will then be shut. It'll sit there vacant for a long time, and then eventually something will be done with the rest of the car park with 16 spaces. I might be talking out of turn here, but long term, I cannot see how we can put two houses next to a 600-year-old building and expect the whole thing to run smoothly. I just can't see it's going to happen. And so therefore, the parking, the access for deliveries, you're trying to mix oil and water. And one last point, it might well be that there's 16 spaces there at the moment because they're unallocated. But perhaps they might have been left unallocated for this very reason. I don't know, you know, but I can't support it. Thank you.
Councillor Riddick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to go back on one or two points which I did mention, I think Councillor Walker and Councillor Anderson have also highlighted that this could be a potential sort of neighbourly dispute which will erupt at some time, because the pub amenity space that's left there, it gets very, very busy in the summer, very noisy indeed. But this was first presented to us on the basis of it's not, the pub's not viable, we've got to have this or else. That was how it was presented. Now, we received a flyer from the pub at the brewery, and what they say is respecting and enhancing the Anchor pub. It said, the Anchor will continue to trade as normal, and a professional viability assessment confirms that it will remain commercially sound. That means it's already commercially sound. So that the first excuse for it, that they'll close it or else, doesn't really hold any water. And this is from one of their own sort of sheets they've sent out. So I'm sorry, I can't support this one.
Yes, you repeated that. Now, any further comments? Right, in which case, can I have a proposer for officer's recommendation? Councillor Guest. Can I have a seconder for officer's recommendation? Councillor Jankowski, thank you. Can I have a show of hands for those in favour of officer's recommendation? 2. Those against officer's recommendation? That looks like 5. Right. Yes, 5. So officer's and abstention, right? So officer's recommendation falls. Right, members. Reasons for refusal. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I may need to be reminded of the actual policy numbers. So apologies in advance for that. But I would provide 2 reasons for refusal. One is the cramped nature of the new development. No, 3 reasons. 1, the cramped nature of the proposal. 2, the impact on the heritage asset. And 3, the impact on the amenity of the residents living in the new properties. I don't think that's, I can't add anything to that, nor can I add anything about the existing road access, because that's precedent's been set on that. I don't think we can refer to that. But those are the 3 reasons I can think of.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Riddick.
Lack of provision of disabled parking spaces for the pub patrons. And that is essential. They need a minimum of 2.
Thank you. Any further reasons? Right.
So can I just, a point of clarity in terms of the impact on the heritage asset, is that in regard to the points that were discussed, that the potential reduction in parking, impact on deliveries, had, so
I would add also the impact on the setting of the building. Design
And is the viability, the impact on the viability of the pub and therefore its continued use in its heritage status something that...
Yes, but just confirming the views of the Conservation Officer, because we are aware that the Conservation Officer did raise concerns that this development would have a negative impact on the viability, the continued use as a pub, but we're not sure whether the Conservation Officer raised concerns that it directly impacted the setting of the heritage asset.
I think, I don't know if this is of any use, but Councillor Riddick's comment about the reduced pub car park footprint being viable means that how is the pub not viable currently? Is the applicant confusing viability of the business with return on the asset?
Yeah, I mean, looking through the Conservation Officer's comments, there is concern in terms of the combination of the massing of the two new units that would cause harm to the setting of the listed building. So there could potentially be the impact in terms of the policy CS27, that kind of direct impact on the setting. The question is then whether members also consider that they consider that the policy, paragraph 210 of the NPPF is also engaged, which is in determining applications, local planning authority should take account of the desirability of sustaining and enhancing the significance of heritage assets and putting them to viable uses consistent with their conservation. So the point being is that as a result of this development, the pub use wouldn't be able to continue as a pub use and would fail that paragraph. So there's two heritage harms there. In terms of the cramped nature of the plot, I don't know, Heather, what's in terms of your conclusion on that particular aspect? I think as a development on a plot, it is a plot, as I understand it, that is of sufficient size to accommodate two dwellings and the parking and garden required for a property of that size. But I think members are not saying that it's overdevelopment, but that the appearance looks cramped in the context of the street scene. So that would be a policy CS11 and CS12 perspective. And then in terms of the impact on the residential amenity of the future properties, obviously there is officers would argue that there shouldn't be a reason for refusal where a condition could mitigate that impact. And there is, I think it's condition 6, which is the noise impact. The agent of change principle has been discussed. The responsibility is on the developer to ensure that the environment in which the future occupiers live is suitable, bearing in mind the adjacent pub. So in terms of noise insulation measures, etc., that would be a requirement and could be achieved through that condition.
Chair, I appreciate the advice, but I feel that's not achievable. And that's the reason why I'm suggesting it should actually be a full-blown refusal rather than a condition.
And I'd like to back that up. I have recently had a licensing issue of an existing pub with gardens backing onto, residential gardens backing onto the garden, in which there are already mitigating, foliage and so on, and it's made no difference to the amount of noise that the gardens experience.
Yeah, I think in this instance, my understanding of the process is that the noise assessment would take account of kind of the worst case scenario of noise emanating from the pub and its pub garden, and then would need to insulate the property to ensure that that property would remain within acceptable noise levels. But if members are of the view that that's not achievable, then that would also link to policy CS12 and Appendix 3 of the Save Local Plan that talks about good standard of amenity for in their own gardens as well.
And the insulation wouldn't be much use when you've got to have your windows open on a hot summer's evening.
No, sorry, Philip, I think it comes down to quiet enjoyment of their amenity.
So obviously the officers would draft the full detail of the reasons for refusal with the final agreement of the chair, but essentially the reasons for refusal, as I understand it, are in terms of the impact on the heritage asset, it's twofold. There is a direct impact on the setting of the listed building, but there's also that this proposal wouldn't allow the pub to sustain in its its viable use. So that links to CS27 and paragraph 210. So there will be two separate reasons for refusal. Third reason for refusal would be the cramped nature of the plot in terms of the appearance of the area. So that would be a policy CS11 and 12. And then the fourth reason of refusal would be that the proposals do not create a satisfactory residential environment for the future occupiers, that the quiet enjoyment point and the use of their private amenity spaces would be affected. So there would be, and that would be a Appendix 3 in Policy CS12 reason for refusal.
Thank you. Right. Now that we've got to the reasons for refusal, do I have a proposer for the refusal? Councillor Anderson, thank you. Do I have a seconder for refusal? Councillor Walker. Oh, I think Councillor Walker just beat you to it, Councillor Allen. Right. Right. So, can I have show of hands those in favour of the reasons for refusal? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in favour for the conditions. Those against the reasons for refusal. 2 and 1 abstention. So officer's recommendation falls. Thank you. It's now 10:10. Item 5D. This is the retention 1769 of the hard standing for vehicles, parking and sales display and boundary fence at the Anthony Betts garage on Leighton Buzzard Road. Heather, over to you. I'm sorry, Philip.
I think myself and Councillor Guest are potentially saying the same thing, but as we have gone past 10 o'clock, we are obliged to do a vote to committee to continue to 10:30.
Thank you. We close at 10:30? Yeah. Thank you. Heather, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So let's move to the first slide. So the application site comprises the Anthony Betts car showroom, workshop and associated car display and parking areas situated off Leighton Buzzard Road. The site falls within the green belt. It's adjacent to the Water End Conservation Area boundary and opposite the boundary for the Chilterns National Landscape. Trees along the eastern site boundary, so along here, are subject to protection by way of a tree preservation order. So planning permission is sought for the retention of paved hard standing areas to be used as additional car display areas and an associated 2-metre high fence, which has been installed along Leighton Buzzard Road. So a previous application was submitted for the works and was refused on 3 grounds. The first being principle of development, the second being visual harm, and the third being that insufficient information had been provided with respect to trees and the impact on them. Appeal was submitted and recently dismissed. And whilst the inspector did not consider the principle of the development to be unacceptable or that the development would cause visual harm, the inspector dismissed the appeal on the ground that insufficient information had been provided to demonstrate that existing trees would be protected. So the current application seeks to address this concern, and the application is before committee as Parish Council have raised objection to the scheme, predominantly on the grounds that the tree report is inaccurate and does not account for trees that have been felled and pruned as part of the development. So this slide just shows the site plan. So you can see areas A and B are where the additional hard standing areas have been created. Also just highlight the trees that are protected are along this boundary here and set in front of the 2-metre high fence. So next slides just show views of the site. So this is views looking into the site from Leighton Buzzard Road. This is views looking the other direction along Leighton Buzzard Road, and you can see the protected trees over here. So these photos just show views within the site, so you can see the additional hard standing areas and the fencing. And then this is a view again taken from within the site but looking towards Leighton Buzzard Road, so you can see the fencing and the protected trees. And just a further view from within the site, but looking this time towards the Anthony Betts structure over here. You can see the fencing again on the right-hand side. So this slide just shows the photos that have been submitted by the Parish Council with respect to trees that they believe that have been felled. So this was raised with the applicant, and the applicants confirmed that no trees have been felled on the site or pruned as part of their works. The agent has confirmed that trees to the rear of the site that fall outside of the curtilage of the Anthony Betts site have been felled, but this was undertaken by a third party, so not as part of this development. So the trees that have been removed, it's understood, were not formally protected because the trees to the eastern site boundary remain. And the submitted tree report concludes that the fence and hard standing have had a limited effect on existing trees and are not harmful to their long-term survival. And this is a position that's been supported by the DVC Trees and Woodlands officer. So in summary, substantial weight is given to the conclusions made by the planning inspector under the recent appeal for the site, and the key outstanding issue relates to the development's impact on trees. It's felt that the current submission addresses this outstanding concern, and it's recommended that the application be approved as per the recommendation set out in the published report. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. We have Mr. McGillivray to speak in objection. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you and good evening. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Great Gaveston Parish Council in opposition to this application. Parish Council would be supportive of appropriate redevelopment of this site, which we consider to be for residential use. Before this site became commercial, part of it was known as Spring Cottage. And there are still more residential properties along this short section of the Leighton Buzzard Road than there are commercial properties. Visually, however, they are overpowered by the inappropriate overuse of these commercial properties. Our objection is in relation to the impact that inappropriate commercial use is having on the River Gade, which is about 20 meters away from the back edge of the parking, which Anthony Betts constructed without planning permission. It is one of England's rare chalk streams, which deserves your protection. This site falls within the High Gate Valley landscape character area. Your own decorum supplementary planning guidance of May 2004 states, Leighton Buzzard Road follows the length of the valley but has an adverse impact, that is the impact on the Gate Valley, an adverse impact on both the historic settlements and through the associated prominent commercial premises. Let me explain a key aspect of the adverse impact, which is not addressed in the officer's report. The original application for retention of this parking indicated that surface water runoff would be controlled and discharged via a soakaway. The actual construction has no control and no soakaway for the runoff, which therefore flows directly into the river. In the event of an oil spill, not uncommon with garages, pollutants will therefore impact on the Gate directly. There is thus evidence of harm that could be caused by this development to the Gate Valley, but more importantly, the extension of motor trade use adjacent to the river poses environmental risks that you should not allow. Finally, this council, amongst others, has spent considerable amounts of money improving the River Gate upstream of this development at the Water End Bridge and downstream of this development at Note Mill Lane and through Gate Bridge Park. Why would you then, on the section of river between where that money has been spent, allow a development that poses a real threat to the flora, fauna, and health of the river? Please will this committee follow its own planning guidance and protect the rare amenity resource that this river provides. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And thank you for keeping to time. Right. Comments, please. If there are no comments, Councillor Allen and Councillor Guest.
So what can be done to require Anthony Betts to put in the mitigation measures to protect the river as described?
So in terms of the discharge of surface water within the site, so there was an intention to install a soakaway, but actually what the materials that have been used are permeable, so water can discharge within the site rather than be directed off-site. So on that basis, I don't consider that there would be a need for mitigation in that regard.
Yeah, essentially there's more than one option to solve a problem. They didn't carry out the first option of a soakaway, but they have carried out a second option, which is to lay a permeable material to allow water to permeate through that material. There's no evidence, as far as I'm aware, to the contrary, that this is not a permeable surface material. And therefore this alternative option is acceptable as outlined in paragraph 9.56 of the report.
Thank you, Chairman. And the previous application was basically refused on two grounds, the third one of them being trees. So from what I understand, it is the trees that we're looking at here, and the arboricultural statement, the arboricultural assessment, that concluded that there'd be no harm in the long term on existing trees from this. And the Trees and Woodlands Department looked at it and they've come to the same conclusion. As for the other reasons for which the application was turned down, well, I drive along this road frequently, and over the years I've been driving along this road, I've not noticed any changes from before this development was built and after it. It can't be seen from the road, this part of the this part of the dealership can't be seen from the road. So on the basis that the trees and woodlands issue, which was the only ground that the inspector upheld the appeal on, has been addressed, and I propose the officer recommendation. You might want to park that.
Seconded.
So we have officer's recommendation in favour, seconded by Councillor Allen. Any further comments from?
Allen or Anderson?
Sorry, Councillor Anderson. Sorry about that. Right. If there are no further comments, can I have, we've got a proposer and a seconder for officer's recommendation.
The only comment I would make, Chair, and seconding it, if there was a way of conditioning sorting out the surface drainage as accused by the gentleman who had to sit there all night to speak, I certainly would propose it, but I think given the explanation we've had from officers, we're not in a position where we can do that. So I'm more than happy just to second it as is.
Thank you. Right. So those in favour of officer's recommendation, show of hands, please. That's 7. There are no against, and there's 1 abstention. Thank you. So officer's recommendation is carried. Thank you. There's no further business on the agenda, and we are closing the meeting at 10:22 by the looks of it.